Mayor Herbeck, we're ready to start.
Kenmore City Council will come to order. First item on the agenda is Planning Commission interviews. Everybody should have a list of questions in front of them, along with, I want to thank staff for printing off copies of the application so we can refer to those easily as we go through this. I want to see if the council is fine with the 7 questions suggested by staff that we have in front of us, or if we would like to change out any of those questions before we begin the interviews. Councilor Lutzis?
I'm just curious, can we ask specific questions if we want to dig a little bit deeper, ask clarifying questions on their applications?
We are a little bit limited for time, and we do want to give everybody the same opportunity, so we generally avoided that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilor Sasson?
I would choose to pull something off this supplementary list that's in front of us, but I might need a quick sec to see which.
Okay. I'd suggest maybe number 3. And are there any objections to removing number 3 and replacing it with, which question were you thinking of from the supplementary questions? No, I'm talking about removing from the questions you already have to make room. Oh, okay, okay. That's also fine too. Are there any objections to asking the 3rd question down on the DEIA considerations questions? The 3rd bullet point down on the, is there any objections to adding that to the questions we're asking?
I think we should frame it in a way that's a question. I think the way that's framed on this
Oh, yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Oh, it's just something to think about more than a question, I guess. Just ask a broad question about the equity toolkit.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think we can frame it in a way. I guess we can say it out loud because we'll be doing it. Yeah. 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 Can you talk about the DIA equity toolkit? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And are we okay with having that question replace? I would toss out question number 3 if I had to look at all these, but that's me. I know they're all tough. We've asked the same ones for years. Or 5 maybe. They are good questions.
I think we have time.
Yeah, number 6 has been answered on all the applications. Are we okay with striking 6? Okay. Yeah, well, a question around that. So we're going to go through these. We're going to start pulling people up. As we pull people up, we'll go down the line asking questions. I'll ask Councilmember Sasson. We'll start with question 1. We'll go this way. Councilmember Sasson, since you have the 3rd one, I'll ask you to figure out exactly what the wording is for the DEIA question before it gets to you. Does that work? Okay. No, we're taking away number 6. So just insert it in there. Does that make sense? We're keeping number 3, we're removing number 6, and we'll put the DA question when it comes to you. Okay. Well, with that, I believe the first person that we have scheduled is Michael Vanderland. Yeah, why don't you come on up?
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, and just for everybody, you'll see that we have six of these question pages, so you can take notes on each individual person if you'd like. All right, well, Councilmember Culver, would you like to start us with question number 1?
Wanted to make sure I understood the format. Thank you. Please provide a 2 to 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
The one question that binds them all.
Is your microphone on?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I've actually been a member of, or a resident of Kenmore for over 30 years. In that 30 years, I've had the privilege actually of being a citizen of Kenmore. I could say that during that 30 years, going up to today, that we're not in the same Kenmore as I recall 30 years ago. Things change. I do expect that over the next 30 years, we're going to see more change. In fact, I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we are already beginning to see an increase in the pace of that change. That's going to take extraordinary effort versus what I've seen over the previous 30 years. That doesn't mean that has to control us or that we need to be fearful of it. It does mean that we need to control it, we need to manage it, and we have the opportunity to shape it. Why do I want to be part of the Planning Commission? Because I'd like to have a part in shaping that future. I think it's important. It's important to me personally, the way I live. It's also important to me in terms of, I think, a contribution to the community in return for that 30 years of residency.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Marshall, question 2.
What do you think are the most important land use and planning issues that the city should address in the next few years?
The interesting thing about that question is I could probably come up with about 4 or 5 different things. The problem is that we've already had mandated to us what our most important thing is going to be. The state has told us 10, 11 has got to be addressed. And I think that's going to take a huge amount of our effort, not only the effort of the Planning Commission, but also from you folks in giving us direction on where to go. But also, I think to be successful, we're going to need to be sure that along the line, we have the support and the understanding of the citizenry, and we bring them along with us. So I think addressing the missing middle issues, that's going to be primary on top of those. I think we also need to deal very carefully with, as we begin to increase the density in our city, and that really seems to be our commitment to do that, whether it's voluntary out of our own or forced upon us, that's inevitable. And as we do that, that's inevitably going to have impacts on our social services. It's going to have an impact on our parks, on our streets. There's going to be increased demand and use. We're going to need to be able to plan for that. Again, you're looking at the Planning Commission, you're looking at a 10 to 30-year time horizon. I think we need to be doing that now because the changes that are going to need to make, the impacts and the pace at which that's going to happen is going to require us to make changes, to make plans now that can be rolled out and have effect in the 5 to 10 years into the future. Those are really my 2 things. Other things will come along. We've got Lake Point. That's always a lingering issue out there. And I think that's probably key to a lot of the other land use issues and the solutions that we can take that gives us flexibility that we wouldn't otherwise have. I think managing that into the future, negotiating that appropriately, zoning it, controlling the land use of that, I think is going to have a huge impact and have a big determinant on what the city looks like 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
Thank you, Councilmember Sasson, with your question.
Yes, thank you. Could you please offer any explicit comments regarding the Kenmore DEIA Equity Toolkit priorities? I'm going to give you examples. Affordable housing, public access to Lake Washington, climate action and environmental initiatives, expanding ADA access and accessible transportation.
I think they're all very worthy goals, and that's really what we should be doing. I find them consistent with a lot of the work I've already done in other places. As a member of the Washington State Employees Credit Union Board, I was part of the committee that developed the DEI approach for the credit union, and we've been rolled out to the membership there and to the employees over a period of 3 to 5 years. And I think we've seen some excellent impact there. In addition, as an employee of UW Medicine, the University of Washington, I've been involved with their DEI activities, in particular developing with the state, a state, eventually federally funded program to deal with DEI issues, particularly within healthcare, particularly within UW Medicine, and how you need to address differences in culture, differences in language, and being able to incorporate that into the way care is delivered. I am proud to have had a significant impact in both the funding for that and the execution, which is ongoing, something that never really ends.
Thank you very much. Councilor Shrubnik, did you want to ask number 3?
Yeah, new number 4. Please provide an example of a teamwork experience where, pardon me, where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role on the team? What techniques did you and the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Hindsight is always dangerous, particularly as you get older. It's hard to look back and say, well, I don't know that I wouldn't do that differently, but probably the example that comes to my mind is very early in my career, and I mean very early at UW. My mentor was the chief executive officer at the time, before there even was a UW Medicine. And I remember going into a planning meeting, which I was invited to as a very junior member. And we're talking about what we were going to do with the rehab program, a very important program at UWMC, as well as especially at Harborview. And financially, it wasn't doing well. And there was a lot of discussion about what do we do? How do we manage this? With the discussion eventually turning to, well, we just have to let it go, or we have to downsize it. As you can imagine, that had an emotional response from a lot of the faculty in particular. And I can remember myself today, almost in slow motion, saying, well, is that really what we value? Is that really what we want to do? And looking at Rob and recalling one of his earlier motions about reminders to me, you know, Mike, there are certain career limiting moves. Wondering if I had just tripped over one of them. Telling the truth to power is always dangerous, but it's what you have to do. And I think I learned that. Luckily, I had some mentors and supporters at the time that I managed to survive it and have a career after that. But I think that's something that's always stuck with me, both in remembering that, but also in my own career and dealing with folks that are my subordinates, people who reported to me.
The Planning Commission may be discussing controversial issues. How would you suggest that the commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? And how would you suggest the Planning Commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
Well, thankfully, we've had the pleasure of having some excellent chairmen who have helped that process along. And I think that's very important. The choice of chair and being able to manage the discussions and being able to make sure that people are listened to. And the value of listening, I think, is absolutely critical here. You can't begin to have respect for other people's opinions or begin to understand them unless you are really prepared to truly listen. And I think that's something we've discussed within the Planning Commission numerous times, and I think it's been successful. And if I were to put my finger on one thing that I think that has contributed to the commission's success over the years, it is that ability to put ego aside and put the higher good and listen to other people. And out of that, I think, can come not just compromise for the sake of compromise, but truly understanding why a different approach or a slightly altered approach could actually be better for the public and come out with a better outcome. So that's what I would, hopefully we'd be able to continue with that history in the past.
Deputy Mayor, question 5.
If you're selected by the City Council to be one of the 7 members on the Planning Commission, you will be appointed to represent the entire community. How will you ensure the Planning Commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision?
Well, the way I've seen that work successfully in the past is it comes out in the discussions we have. And thankfully, we don't have or haven't had in the past folks that are shy about coming forward with their opinion and also shy about calling them on it. Is this something that you really think is good for the community, or is this something that your neighbors are pressuring you to do? Because peer pressure, particularly in a something like a planning commission role. I don't have to tell you what that feels like. That can be very powerful. So I think part of it is mutual support, understanding that you can have those discussions, even though we're public meetings, you can create a sense of a safe place where you can have those discussions and you can have respect for people. Because again, getting back to my initial point, you can't listen when you're afraid. You can't listen when you're concerned about what my neighbor is going to be thinking. You have to have a grounding if you're going to be on the planning commission and a sense of principles and a sense of values of where you're at. And that takes you above parochial or regional interest.
Thank you. Councilor Lucis, question 7.
Do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
Just about 6. I think one of the things that I would really like to say, or have the opportunity to say, is one of the things that really comes back within the commission in our discussions is we'll eventually come back to a question of, so what will the city council make of this? How do we approach this with the city council? Those folks got elected. We got appointed. So they're out front. So are we being realistic about what we're proposing here? Having a sense going in and as we go along about where you folks stand on a particular issue can really be very helpful to us. We don't spend a lot of time shadowboxing, trying to anticipate what may or may not be what you see as the reading of what the city needs, what the city wants. So yes, that's what I would say is let's keep some good dialogue back and forth. It doesn't have to be continual, but it has to be enough so we can frame our work and come up with conclusions that are realistic and are going to be consistent with where the city council wants to go in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vendelin. And we're going on to our next candidate. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And apologies to everybody. This process is very swift and rushed. So I apologize if it feels like we're cranking through, folks. Next up, I'd like to invite Becca Bailey.
Good evening.
Councilmember Culver, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, hello. Please provide a 2 to 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
I believe I would be an excellent candidate for the Planning Commission because I have a love and dedication to my community. I have a desire to be more involved, and I come with a multitude of perspectives. I am currently enrolled as a student at Cascadia College as an environmental studies major, and that would touch on the natural, shoreline, and climate action elements of our comprehensive plan. I'm also an employee for a small local business, the Guest House Restaurant, and that would help support the economic development element of our comprehensive plan. I also have a decade of employment history at a local retirement community, working with seniors and mentoring high school students. And I just have a deep desire to learn more about the inner workings of city government and how to better serve my community. I'm also a young female candidate, and I feel that sets me apart from other candidates and current appointed members. And I feel like I just have a lot of sprinkle to add to the cookie. So.
Councilor Marshall.
What do you think are the most important land use and planning issues the city should address in the next few?
I feel that seeing that our city lies within a major watershed and that in relation to our downtown development plan, that would come with a great amount of impervious surface, and how to counteract that by implementing rain gardens, native plant vegetation, and perhaps adding community gardens and pea patches. Development, if done right, can harmoniously combine urban functionality and environmental connection. And I think that also goes in hand with urban revitalization, which would include redeveloping underutilized properties, supporting small but local businesses, and enhancing public spaces to foster community engagement.
Councilmember Sassen.
Hi, thank you. Would you please offer reflections on the Kenmore DEIA Equity Toolkit priorities? Again, I'll give a couple of examples. You're welcome to go beyond that, but affordable housing, public access to Lake Washington, climate action, environmental initiatives, expanding ADA and accessibility transportation options.
I will just touch on the climate action element as that I feel that's more of my strong suit. I think as I earlier mentioned, I feel like focusing on sustainable development and infrastructure and placement where our city is on the watershed is of great importance. And that's really all I have to say to address that question.
Councilor Shopnak.
Yeah, please provide an example of a teamwork experience where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role on the team? What techniques did you and or the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
The first thing that comes to mind is my experience as a dining room manager at Chateau Retirement. It was during COVID when we had the lockdown and we had to quickly work as a team to formulate a plan to still provide meals to our residents and to make sure they felt safe and comfortable. That was very much a trial and error situation as we worked our way through the COVID pandemic. And I don't think I would have changed anything because as a team, we worked really well together and we didn't have any COVID cases at our retirement community for the first 2 years during the pandemic. And I think we did a really great job.
Thank you. The Planning Commission may be discussing controversial issues. How would you suggest that the Planning Commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? And how would you suggest the Planning Commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
Establishing ground rules and clear guidelines for respectful dialogue during meetings, providing a structured agenda and giving speakers equal amount of time to speak to ensure opposing views feel equally heard.
Deputy Mayor?
If you are selected by the City Council to be one of the 7 members on the Planning Commission, you will be appointed to represent the entire community. How will you ensure the Planning Commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision?
Inclusive engagement by actively engaging with a diverse selection of community members. Stakeholder representation, ensuring small local business voices are heard, and transparent communication regarding how community input is integrated.
Councilor Lutzis?
Yes, do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
I do not have any questions. I just thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your time and for coming. That brings us to Vincent Keene.
Good evening.
Good evening. Councilmember Culver, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you. Please provide a 2 to 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
Sure, thank you. I've lived in Kenmore for 8 years now and have been part of several committees and organizations that have worked for Kenmore's future planning. I was actually a member of the Walkways and Waters Committee before I actually even had closed on my house and really saw a great project there come to life throughout my time here. And it was inspiring to me to continue to be involved. I later served on the fiscal task force this year, the Financial Sustainability Task Force. I think that it's important, as my predecessors have said, for us to be very thoughtful about what's going to be happening with Kenmore in the coming years. That pressure coming for growth, that pressure coming for density, the fact that we're talking about 6 square miles, I think is going to create some friction. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge to keep what I consider to be the spirit of Kenmore, while, as my predecessors, I agree with, while there will inevitably be change. And I think I can bring an open mind to those topics. I certainly have preferences, but I'm actually fairly a data-driven guy at times, and emotionally driven. And I think that my ability to sort of operate on both sides of that fence would be beneficial.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall? 2.
We're not switching them around this year. Okay.
No.
That makes it
we-
easy. I
We
should
came
know.
in this too quickly to really set up something
Okay,
complicated.
that's
so-
fine. What do you think are the most important land use and planning issues that the city should address in the next few years?
Yeah, I'll confess I have a couple as well, but I think it's the density issue as well. I think it's that issue that we are running out of development area, and there is a need to find additional housing within the greater Seattle area. We need to balance that with our open spaces, with our parks. I think that the transportation factor, and I actually, be honest, I don't know how much that plays into this, but I think transportation continues to be a huge factor. In all of the above, how do we make Kenmore an accessible and enjoyable place to live, and at the same time be able to deal with increased traffic, increased retail needs, increased human needs in the area? Certainly there's, again, the Lake Point development, which I think is interesting. I've been watching that since I have gotten here and wondering what will ever happen to it. But overall, I'd say it's the density and the ultimate running out of space.
Councilmember Sassen?
Thank you. Would you like to offer reflections regarding Kenmore's DEIA equity toolkit priorities? Examples, affordable housing, public access to Lake Washington, climate action, environmental initiatives, ADA, and accessible transportation options. Feel free to expand.
Yeah, holistically, I'm very proud that we have them. When we were on the Financial Sustainability Task Force, we did use them as part of our guidance as to how we were thinking about various aspects of the budget and the raising of revenue or the cutting of costs. So I think that they are a very important part of how we move forward and envision ourselves as a future. In terms of access to the lake, again, and the waterways, I've been very impressed with what Kenmore's been able to do in the management of those projects that I was involved with, just from the walkways and waterways point of view. And I know that there's a big press here in the North Shore area to determine what additional recreation and activities types of things are going to be done. I'm thinking about the recreational study that was done, and I'm curious and want to make sure that those things are done in a way that, again, is accessible and useful to all members of our community.
Councilmember Shevnik?
Yeah, thank you. Please provide an example of a teamwork experience where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role in the team? What techniques did you and or the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the fiscal task force again for that one. It was a really, I think, a dynamic group. I enjoyed being a part of it. I think that from a teamwork point of view, there were different questions and difficult decisions to be made when we were creating recommendations for you all. We absolutely did not all agree all the time. But I think that what was wonderful about that experience for me and what encouraged me to be here tonight was the idea that there was a very civilized and respectful discourse. I think in the 4 or 5 months in which we're meeting, I don't feel that there was ever a moment where someone felt they couldn't share their idea or their opinion. I would say the one thing that I would potentially do differently were I to serve on a similar committee in the future would be to more regularly check in on the overall goals and objectives of the committee, the organization. I found that when we got to the end, I will say for myself, I still found that I wasn't always understanding and aligned with my fellow committee members as to what exactly our specific mandate was. And we had been talking about that in the beginning and we talked about it at the end, but I feel like we probably should have revisited it throughout.
The Planning Commission may be discussing controversial issues. How do you suggest that the Planning Commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? And how would you suggest the planning commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
Yeah, that's a good one. Not that that's come up recently in this room, huh? I think again, it has to do with I don't know that I have an original answer to that one. I think it has to do with being open and honest for the commission to have a fair and stated mandate. I think that the ground rules for the public meetings are important. I think understanding the value of everyone's input is important. And for me personally, I think it would be very important for me to learn from folks who have served on the committee before me, the commission before me. I would certainly be, this would be my first time in that type of setting, so I would need to be very thoughtful and listen to people who had solved those problems before me.
Deputy Mayor?
If you are selected by the city council to be one of the 7 members of the planning commission, you'll be appointed to represent the entire community. To ensure the planning commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision.
You know, I've listened to that twice now and I'm like, oh my goodness, I really hope the word guarantee isn't in that question. I think it's difficult to ensure that, especially in a situation where it's difficult to have active involvement from all stakeholders in the process. We can certainly say we want to be open, we want to facilitate input, we're going to do outreach. We've seen success and failure in the outreach to get a lot of stakeholders in Kenmore to stand up and show up with their perspectives. And at times it's been me. I see what happens in this room later on in the week and I'm like, oh my goodness, I really should have been there. I would have appreciated being a part of that. So part of it, I think, is being present. Part of it is being open and understanding that we're going to do our best. I think it's about that constant outreach. And I think it's also about longitudinal. I don't know that every decision that's going to get made is going to be absolutely what everyone in the town wants at the same time. I actually think that's an unrealistic goal. But I think on whole, across time and space, we ought to be speaking as a group and as a community. I've been disappointed by some of the things that have happened in Kenmore and incidences, but on whole, I'm a very satisfied and appreciative resident.
Councilmember Lucis.
Do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
Sure. I guess, what would be interesting to me is what do you think has worked best with the Planning Commission in the past and what do you feel could be improved?
I mean, speaking for myself, I would say when we're able to work with the Planning Commission as they're iterating through a big project so that they can have touch points with us to kind of take our temperature, see what we're thinking of what they're working on, and then kind of iterate from that. I think that's worked out really well when we've been able to do that sort of thing. It's difficult because, you're all busy people too and already giving up your Thursdays and, coming in for another meeting is a difficult ask sometimes. But those sort of touch points, I think, have been particularly helpful when we're working through something kind of meaty to really get feedback as we're going so that you're not bringing us something and we're looking at going, what the heck is this? How do they land here, right? Because that's not a good feeling for us, for anybody. So I found that that's been something that's been really effective as we've worked through things. Councilmember Marshall.
And I think our planning commission has done a great job at this issue that's eternal, but to continue that commitment to making sure the public is notified and involved and to really emphasize to people, wow, this may sound like the most dry, tedious stuff, but this is where the rubber hits the road, folks. We got to come in and get it done because this is going to shape, a lot. It's subject to change, but it's going to be going to the council. And we rely on that work so much. So just that public awareness commitment.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Edward LaSalle, who is coming in remotely today.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Apologies for that. I tested positive on Friday for COVID. I am no longer feeling ill, but I felt that you wouldn't appreciate my candidacy all that much if I were to contaminate you by coming tonight.
Yes, I think we appreciate you making this decision. Councilmember Culver, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you. Safety first, absolutely. Hope you feel better. Please provide a 2 to 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I hope to be a good candidate. First of all, I've mentioned it many times to you during public comments. I deeply love Kenmore. I was welcomed and really felt a connection to Kenmore like I have never before in the cities I've lived, either in Europe or over here. In terms of what I hope to bring to the role, I think throughout my career, I've been able to bring together data, disparate data sometimes into a coherent story. And make it actionable. And also in the role of advisor to you, City Council, I know how to follow through a strategy and make those tactical recommendations so that the story and the strategies actually come to life in a way, hopefully, that will be of value to you as you make the decisions for the city.
Councilor Marshall?
What do you think are the most important planning and land use issues the city should deal with in the next few years?
There's a lot, but I think that the two that I feel are the most all-encompassing would be affordability, not only affordable housing, but just affordability in general of how we make sure that the city is affordable from services, transportation, land use perspective for all our residents, as well as climate change and how we can maintain our quality of life with climate change, preserving our parks, making sure that we can balance greenery with urban density, while at the same time making sure that we help Kenmore grow and not just keep everything as is and freeze it in a never-ending future.
Councilmember Sassen?
Thank you. Would you offer reflections on the Kenmore DEIA, equity toolkit priorities, examples, affordable housing, public access to the lake, climate action, environmental initiatives, ADA and accessibility, transportation options? Feel free to expand.
Thank you. Yes, so I was lucky enough to benefit from the EIA toolkit as part of the work we did for the financial sustainability plan. I think this was beyond what you mentioned. I think it was very, very necessary because equality is something we often strive for, but unfortunately, equality is not as important as equity. And while we try and keep our minds as open as possible to make sure that we think of everything, we all naturally, myself included, have biases that we don't account for, hence why they are biases. And having that toolkit really helped me while working on the FSP task force to try and factor in elements that I had not considered by forcing myself to go back to those guiding principles. And I think it was really beneficial for myself as well as for the rest of the group. So big supporter of the toolkit and looking forward to hopefully using it in the Planning Commission role moving forward.
Councilmember Schiffman?
Thank you. Yeah, please provide an example of a teamwork experience where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role on the team? What techniques did you and the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. So at the risk of copying off my colleague Vincent on the FSP task force, I like to refer to the FSP task force because it was one of the most important works that I have the privilege of being engaged on recently. I think to get to where we were able to get to, discussion, open and honest communication throughout, as well as a clear reminder on what are we supposed to do and what are we trying to achieve, not just at the end or at the beginning, but throughout the conversation and throughout the working sessions is really important. I think that assuming best intent, if we drive our recommendations from data with a clear understanding of what is the strategy and the end goal, then of course there's no perfect solution, but I hope we can get to the best, and I hope we did get to the best solution we could in that specific situation and framework. Hindsight is 2020. I don't know if I necessarily would want to do anything differently, because I think that the learning process that we went through was part of the work. If I were to say, hey, we do this differently now, I could only say this because of all the work we've achieved. So in order for me to do things differently, I'd have to have a time machine to go with that.
Thank you very much. The Planning Commission may be discussing controversial issues. How would you suggest that the Planning Commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? How would you suggest the Planning Commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
That's always a tricky one. I think what I would want to do personally is always assuming best intent. People who come, take time off of their busy schedule to express an opinion means that they care. And 99% of the case of the time, that means that they care for a reason and not just to make noise, but because there is a real underlying issue. The people who care oftentimes want to find the best solution. So I think it's the challenge there is more being able to understand what is the data and what is the need behind the emotion, and being able to understand what the underlying issue is to address it, rather than remaining only on what can be said or what can be heard. So assuming best intent is probably what my guiding principle would be in that case.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
If you're selected by the City Council to be one of the 7 members on the Planning Commission, you will be appointed to represent the entire community. How will you ensure the Planning Commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision?
So first of all, of course, public comment, the ability to engage. This role is public, and so I would count on that for having the ability to be accessible, either in person or digitally, through social media or through email or whatever. I feel very strongly about that because, as I mentioned many times, I was welcomed in the city by everyone. And I think it's my obligation to listen to all. And what I hope, as I mentioned in the first question, I think of bringing different data points to make a comprehensive story. This isn't the Edward view of Kenmore. I hope to enable the Kenmore view of Kenmore through this role. So really discussion, public accessibility, and the ability to listen to what is shared by everyone within Kenmore.
Thank you. Councilor Lutzis.
Thank you. Now, for your final question, do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
Yeah. So if I have the honor of being selected, I think what I would love to really understand is how can we make sure, and how can I make sure that we engage regularly to understand the right flavor on the priorities. The priorities are public of what is important to you moving forward, but I think every priority that is listed here could have multiple interpretations. I think what's really important for me would be to understand for each of those as the different topics arise, what is the flavor and what is the accent you wish to bring individually and as a group to all of those priorities, so that they are clear and not left to my personal interpretation of it.
I am not sure if we have an answer for that one right now, Ms. Schultz. That's a big one. But I think more regular check-ins, and maybe there's other ways for us to engage with the Planning Commission. Deputy Mayor?
I would say that we do have an obligation to present clear direction. I also highly recommend regular attendance to actual council meetings in addition to Planning Commission meetings to catch the nuance of our statements and how we converse about topics on the dais. I think one of the roles as planning commissioners is in between the council and the community to help us create the plan and vision for our future. And we're selecting people for all sorts of reasons. And one of them is your ability to get a sense, we're trusting that your judgment by placing you on the committee.
on the commission. So I do think participation in attending council meetings is you don't have to come to everyone, but I'm just saying it's a nice addition for your ability to grasp where we are coming from as well.
Thank you.
Anything further on this? All right, thank you very much, Edward.
Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to invite Kara Macias.
Hi.
Hey, Councilmember Culver, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you. Good evening. Please provide a 2 or 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think there's 2 big reasons. Personally, I grew up here in Bothell. I've lived in Kenmore for 12 years. I love this city. I love everything about it. I think it's a special place and I want to keep that special place. On a professional level, I'm very familiar and have technical ability reviewing contracts and scope. Words matter in my career. Words matter deeply and details matter. So I think there's a refinement that happens through the Planning Commission that I'm very comfortable with. I've been involved in strategic planning opportunities and business roles as well. So these are all things that are comfortable and mean a great deal to me personally and professionally.
Councilor Marshall.
What do you think are the most important land use and planning issues the city should address in the next few years?
So on your upcoming docket, I know that there's going to be coming up on economic development and your downtown element. I think those pieces are huge in how we look at Kenmore in the next 10 to 20, 30 plus years. I think those pieces in particular, we want a holistic view of those. We want those to be intentional and well thought and well planned. We want to make sure that there's good input from people on the, from all of the residents on that. I think that part of that is how we plan in with our natural environment. You know, you have placed climate action on your top goal. And I think that's a critical eye that we need to look at when we're looking at all these planning issues is we have special places here in Kenmore and we have listed those as top priorities. So I think it's important that those are going to come into play and how those interact with each other.
Councilmember Sassen.
Thank you. Would you offer reflections, please, on the Kenmore DEIA Equity Toolkit priorities? Again, examples, affordable housing, public access to Lake Washington, climate action and environmental initiatives, ADA and accessibility, transportation options.
I think I noted this in my planning application that I think as we move forward, I think there's a need and a focus to make sure that as we're planning and as we're planning density, as we're planning growth, that we keep in mind that we have lower income residents here and we do not want to push them out. We want to make sure that there's a space here for them. I also feel that same way about our resident businesses and our local businesses, that we keep them in mind, that we have them included. And I also think there's a big focus on making sure that these small communities thrive, that we set them up for success. We set our businesses up, we set our residents up for success. We want everybody to thrive in the city.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, please provide an example of a teamwork experience where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role on the team? What techniques did you and or the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. So I'll go back a few years. I was working on a very technical Ralph Anderson home, and we were in the midst of winter weather, and I knew that what we were doing on the house was presenting a safety hazard to our subs, to our workers, and that the option I was proposing was a 6-figure option, a 6-figure plan. And there was major pushback. I was a young project manager at the time. I was the only female on the team, and I was still trying to find my voice and find my seat at the table. And I knew it was the right decision. I knew it was the right path. I had to sell everybody on this path. And we made it, we did it, and 8 days later, we got a foot of snow, and it would have been a disaster on the project. It would have crushed the project. And looking back, I knew then that when you have that moment of feeling like you absolutely know this is the right decision, that it cannot be wrong, you have to move forward. And it was a lesson learned.
The Planning Commission may be discussing controversial issues. How would you suggest the Planning Commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? And how would you suggest the Planning Commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
So in my foundation, I have always taken it, we have a point A and a point B that we want to get to. And if we can all find this little piece of point A ground that we can all agree on, we can build from point A and get to point B. The goal is how to get the consensus and drive the consensus and make everybody feel like their voice is included. I think that's part of why we have this planning commission and we cast a wide net, is that we have people with different voices and different viewpoints and different areas of the city that we can all mesh those opinions and get to point B.
Deputy Mayor.
You're selected by the City Council to be one of the 7 members on the Planning Commission. You'll be appointed to represent the entire community. How will you ensure the Planning Commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision?
I think it's really critical that as a planning commissioner, even though I may not personally agree with the decision, the goal is to look at the decision as a whole. I don't want to piecemeal the planning commission. We need to look at it together and as a group. And I think that part of that is that we get our directive from you. You are telling us what your goals are and what your top 5 is, what your priorities are. And our goal is to listen to that. I think that gaining that consensus with you as council, that's our directive, and reaching everybody's voice. I think it's fantastic that we have different people on this planning commission that we can draw from. I think that only helps for a better, complete, and more grounded plan.
Councilor Lutzis.
Do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
I don't, but thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Last but not least, Judy O'Brien.
Hello.
Hello, Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Hello. Please provide a 2 or 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear everything you said. Could you speak up a little bit for me, please?
Sure. Please provide a 2 or 3 minute overview of why you believe you are a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come here and talk with you all. My experience, I spent about 8 years with a city on the Planning Commission, and most of that I was the chair of the Planning Commission. I also headed the Shoreline Master Plan Commission. In those capacities, I dealt with not only very passionate community members and residents, but also attorneys. And, we were able to do some really great things. I also spent 28 years, I'm still am, in the real estate industry, which includes commercial development for a $40 million project in downtown Bellevue, as well as residential housing and, personal development. I do have a very good understanding of codes and how those codes and zoning impact long-term communities. And I'd like to be able to share my experiences with the Planning Commission for the future growth of Kenmore. I'm super excited about it because Kenmore is at a pivotal point, and these decisions are going to determine who Kenmore is going to be and what Kenmore is going to look like in 15 years. And I know we all want Kenmore to be this amazing city and maintain the character that it currently has and still embrace a lot of the development that it truly needs.
Councilmember Marshall.
What do you think are the most important planning and land use issues that the city should address in the next few years?
Of course, the density is a priority for most of the communities or the cities right now. But I also think besides, housing affordability and land use, I think it's really important to make sure that our codes are consistent with what we envision for later on. And having the ability to also ensure that our community, our residents feel that that relationship is positive with our planning commission as well as our city council members. It's really important, especially when you're going through some big developmental stages. You know, there's residents who have been here for many, many years who will not want this city to change. And I can certainly understand that, but development happens. It's going to happen and we need it. But we also want to make sure that the residents understand what the goals are. And, you know, it'd be great to get them on board and essentially approve what your plans are for the city.
Councilor Sassen.
Thank you. Would you offer reflections on the Kenmore DEIA Equity Toolkit priorities? Examples being affordable housing, public access to the lake, climate action and environmental initiatives, ADA and accessibility, transportation options. Feel free to expound.
I believe Kenmore DEIA Toolkit is vital towards ensuring that our city planning and development processes are inclusive and equitable for all members of the community. And it's essential that we are approaching the growth with a focus on diversity, ensuring that voices from all backgrounds are heard. And I'm part of that diverse community.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, thank you. Please provide an example of a teamwork experience where reaching a decision was an important goal. What was your role on the team? What techniques did you and or the group use to reach a decision? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
I will reflect on a time when I was the chair of the Planning Commission in Medina. There have been, or there were some times where, one positive aspect about being on the Planning Commission or the City Council is that you have these individuals with different backgrounds, different experiences, they work in different industries and different thoughts and what they feel that the city should be. And it's wonderful to be able to bring this together. But I think what's most important and what made the ability for the city to move forward in a lot of these decisions was really listening to one another and understanding what that team member wanted to say. Really having facts and data behind us to help us make those decisions and being able to take the time to be respectful and listen to one another so that we could get to a consensus. Ultimately, not everyone is always going to agree, but I think that, it's important that people are heard and they need to feel heard, and whether you're a planning commissioner or a resident in this city.
Excuse me. The Planning Commission may be taking up some controversial issues. How would you suggest that the commission facilitate discussion and decision-making to work towards resolution when conflicting opinions are expressed? And how would you suggest the Planning Commission consider conflicting opinions expressed during a public hearing?
During public hearings, yeah. I would expect there would be some meetings where you do have some, residents that are very emotional, or quite honestly, even planning commissioners as well. Again, I think it's really important to listen to people, to provide facts and data, but even above that is asking questions. I know we like to sometimes let people go to the podium and say what they have to say and give their opinion of why they do or don't think what we're doing is the right thing to do. But I also think that engaging them is really important. And I think that shows a level of respect beyond just listening and giving someone 2 minutes at a podium. And we found that was very, very helpful. And it also opened up a lot of communication with residents. Again, it goes back to those relationships that you have with your community, with your residents that live here, that are going to be very important.
Okay, before the deputy mayor asks her question, I am going to adjourn the special meeting and start our regular meeting, and we will continue with the business in front of us. Deputy Mayor?
If you're selected by the city council to be one of the 7 members of the planning commission, you'll be appointed to represent the entire community. How will you ensure the planning commission recommendations will represent the entire community's thoughts and vision?
Don't know what the full processes are as far as, but I do think that open houses, so for example, seating your next planning commissioners, you've got 3, I think, coming in, is that correct? I think it's great to have an open house and invite the community to meet them, because that really opens up the opportunity to have engagement with the direct community. My husband and I were walking some dogs in our neighborhood, and we happened to run into a city council person. And we said hi and we were talking and that, but that's great. I mean, that's the communication that we want. So when we all go home, if you have residents that have met you, or you see them in the store, it's nice to be able to have those open houses. I think also your representation in the community, whether you're talking to your neighbor or your friend, it's important to remember that you do represent the city and you do represent the planning commission. I always encourage people to come to the meetings, and, I will tell you that initially, the city of Medina was known for the worst city to try to build in. Their processes were terrible, and the community members, the residents just weren't happy with them. And by the time I left, it was a completely, not that I personally changed everything, but it was a completely different environment and relationship with the city and the developers that were building in the city. So.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Thank you. And for your last question, do you have any questions that you would like to ask us?
I am curious what the relationship is, or how is the relationship with the Planning Commission? And are there study sessions that you do together?
Yeah, like I was saying during one of the previous interviews, sometimes when we have especially a meaty piece, or say the comp plan, as we're working through pieces of the comp plan, we will have the Planning Commission or members of the Planning Commission come and talk to us about what they've been working on, and we can give them feedback in kind of real time and maybe, push them in a slightly different direction if we're not totally comfortable with the direction they're going, or something like that. So I know we try to do that. We also have, strong relationship with the staff that staffs the Planning Commission. And not that, they can read our minds, but I think they have a pretty good idea generally where we are on issues and are good at conveying that, I think.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, it's a really exciting time for Kenmore and what's going to be happening in the next 10 to 15 years. So hopefully I have an opportunity to participate with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now I want to ask my colleagues before we move on to appointments. Do we all want just a couple minutes to flip through our notes, or do we? Okay, so why don't we take a couple of minutes? Let's say like 3 or 4 minutes, and then we will get into item B on the business agenda. All right, has everybody been able to put together their thoughts? All right, so we have a couple different ways of doing this, and I know that no matter how we do this, it becomes uncomfortable because we have incredibly qualified people in front of us right now. We have 6 people and we have three openings. We have a couple ways we could do this. We could, like we did last time, somebody could just toss out a nomination and we could discuss that and vote on them, vote on people individually. Or we could run through the list, and we've done this in the past where we've had folks pick 3, and as we go through the list, everybody can put up their thumbs and we can track that and see who the top vote getters are, and then we can do a tiebreaker if there are ties. Are folks okay with, I prefer the second version rather than, okay. Does anybody else have any objections to doing it? All right, everybody gets 3 votes. Don't cheat. I am keeping track. I know. I know. All right, so I'm just gonna go through them in, excuse me, the order that we had. Please make sure you put up your thumbs where I can see them. I'll be calling out votes for the public's sake, in case they can't see things on the camera. So we're gonna start off with Michael Vanderland. All those in favor? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Okay, so we've got Marshall, Sasson, O'Kane, Lucis. Becca Bailey. Okay, I see Culver, Marshall, Lucis. Oh, okay, sorry. Sasson and Lucis. All right. Vincent Keen. 1, 2, 3. So that's Culver, Trebnick, Edward LaSalle. See Culver, Sasson, Trebnick, and myself. Kara Macias, Marshall, O'Kane, and Lucis. And actually, I'm voting for that one too. And then Judy O'Brien. Trebnick and okay. Just making sure that everybody voted 3 times. All right, let me just do some quick math really quickly. All right, so we had, excuse me, geez. We've got 4 candidates who received 4 votes. Those would be Vanderland, Bailey, Keen, LaSalle, and Macias. We had Victor Keen got 3 votes, Judy O'Brien got 2. So that leaves us with 4 people with 4 votes. And again, Vanderland, Bailey, sorry, I wrote down initials here. I'm having to check everything. Vanderland, Bailey, LaSalle, and Macias. We need to cull that down to 3. So give me a second while I make a new ballot for myself here to track everything. All right, same rules apply. 3 votes. Michael Vanderland. Thumbs. Marshall, Sasson, O'Kane, Lucis, Trebnick. Sorry, Sasson, Trebnick. Okay, all right. Bailey, Becca Bailey. Lutzis, Culver, hang on, Culver. Oh, I need to vote on these two, don't I? Sorry, I'm too busy taking everybody's temperature here. Okay. Yeah, I'm adding a vote for Vanderlyn because I was not paying attention to vote. So back to Becca Bailey. Who did we have? We had Culver, Marshall, Sasson, and Lutzis. Okay. Edward LaSalle. Culver, Sasson, Shrubnik, O'Kane, and myself, and Kara Macias. Marshall, Shrubnik, O'Kane, Marshall, Shrubnik, O'Kane, Lutzis, and myself, because I need to vote for 3. All right, let me just do that really quickly. 1, 2, 3. All right, luckily we did not end up in a second tie situation. Michael Vanderlyn got 6. Edward LaSalle got 5, Kara Macias got 5, and Becca Bailey received 4 votes. I would propose that we move to appoint Vanderlyn, LaSalle. Well, I would entertain a motion to appoint Vanderlyn, LaSalle, and Macias, with Bailey being put on the contingency list should an opening occur unexpectedly in the next little while. Unless there are any objections, I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second. I'd like to see all the people we interviewed on that list.
Oh, all 6 of them?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. We can do that. And I'll send the full rankings to the clerks that we have that for the future.
And I actually, if we were going to have discussion, was going to suggest that as well. We had an incredible slate.
Yeah.
This is incredibly good slate.
Yeah, I know I had a really tough time flipping through this. All right, we do have a motion. Do we have a second? I'm sorry. Okay. Motion from Councilmember Shrubnik, second from Councilmember Marshall. The motion is the 3 folks I named and then everybody else on the contingency list. Any discussion? Councilor Lutzis.
With that contingency list, are we going to make sort of an order on who to call first based on the votes?
I believe we would. I mean, I'll rank them and give them to the clerk so they have them for the record.
Just for clarification purposes, thank you.
Yeah. Any further discussion? I'd just like to say that everybody who came and applied today, I know it's not easy to come in front of public and interview for a job in public. As everybody has said so far, this is one of the strongest batch of planning commission applicants we've seen in my entire time on council. And I had a very tough time with these last 6. And I think other folks on this dais have the same problems trying to nail it down to 3 people. It's very difficult. We appreciate you all putting yourselves forward. And like we said, everybody who was interviewed today but was not selected will be put on a contingency list in case an opening happens, because they happen somewhat regularly. So unless there's Councilor Lutzis.
I also want to echo that and just say, as somebody who's been in that seat twice before and interviewed before the council, I completely understand a lot of the preparation that went into this, the time and thought and effort. And I just want to thank all of our applicants. Again, very qualified all around, and thank you for coming out and for showing your passion and care for our community.
Anything further? All right, would the clerk please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. On the motion to appoint Michael Vanderlyn, Edward LaSalle, and Kara Macias to the Planning Commission and add all remaining interviewees to the vacancy list, Councilmember Culver.
Yes.
Councilmember Sasson.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the motion is adopted unanimously. All right, that brings us to the rest of our regular meeting. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Sassen. Here. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
All present.
All right, next on the agenda is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtla, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Now, if you would all stand and join me in the flag salute.
Flag of the United States of America, Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there are any objections, sorry, my microphone is acting weirder than usual. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Hearing no objections, the agenda is approved unanimously. Mr. City Manager, where is the fun?
Couple things. First, turn the time over to Jennifer Gordon, our Public Works Operations Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Michelle's going to put some pictures up here in just a second. We hosted our annual volunteer work party cleanup at Log Boom Park this past Saturday in honor of Kenmore's first mayor, Jack Crawford. We lucked out with the weather. It was a little bit breezy, but it was quite warm. And we managed to miss the rain. We had 53 volunteers on Saturday of all ages, including a group from the Hilltoppers Garden Club. The volunteers removed Japanese knotweed, blackberry, and other invasives. We planted natives in their place and finished off with a layer of mulch. We cleaned the history path signage. We did a trash pickup throughout the whole park, including a bunch of microplastics on the beach. And finally, we were able to rake up a bunch of that gunk that builds up along the shoreline. There's a lot. So if you saw the pictures, there's a huge pile. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone for coming out. We had a great turnout and we really did accomplish a lot.
It was a fun morning. And I got to play with grabber nabbers for the first time, which was great.
Thank
And it's
you.
surprising how much stuff is buried in that sand.
All right, next up is Stephanie Lukash, our Deputy City Manager.
All right, well, we have one other fun thing to share. So the Kenmore Police had the pleasure of helping Special Olympics of Washington with the Northwest Regional Bowling Competition at Kenmore Lanes. And the event included opening ceremonies and competitions to showcase individual and team skills of all the athletes and also partners who were there. Chief Moen and Officer Boyer, you can see, were there among the, they were honored to award medals to the athletes, guard the coveted Special Olympics torch, and they were able to join in the festivities. And we're really excited to share that winners in the regional competition will move on to the state championships to be held in the Tri-Cities. So you can see how much fun they had in all these pictures.
Great event. All right. Next, we have public comments. Welcome to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and the council. Folks will have 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will call your name when it's your turn. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time to make every person feel welcome and safe here. Please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, and other interruptions. The meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 5 guests on site wishing to speak and 0 guests waiting online. Patrick O'Brien, Tracy Benishinsky, Jim Myers, Elizabeth Mooney, and Nancy Hansen.
All right, good evening, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. It's very funny that people that just interviewed for the job of telling us what the future of Kenmore is they're going to report back to you, and then somehow that goes to staff. But I'll tell you right now, the problem with the whole process is staff and the implementation of the dream. And if you want any proof of that, you'd look at Kenmore Village, you look at City Hall, you look at several other projects in the city and see where they went over budget, bought real estate very high, sold very low, gave property away, and the taxpayers' dream was not realized. And that happened because of slack management of the city council to the city manager, and then again from him to his staff. The vision of Kenmore does not deride from his brain or their brain. It should come from the elected officials, and you have failed to hold them accountable. And I can talk to the maintenance facility, the rowing club. I can talk ad nauseum, as you know, about the frailties of the process. We should be voting on anything that Rob Carlindsey wants to give away that's worth more than $1 million. There better be a public vote, because that's stealing from the wealth of the Kenmore citizens and giving it to people usually that are not in this city right now. It should be veterans, senior citizens, and handicapped and displaced people in the mobile home parks. The mobile homes need to come first before any other people in King County, the state, the United States, or the world are entitled to nothing until those people are given homes, and they need to find a mechanism to buy them. You can say, oh, we want low income all day long. You can't fund low income. You don't have the money. You don't have the technical ability to get the loans needed. Those people who need housing need to get government-backed loans like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and something new, and then they can have a stake in the real estate they live in. And all the pap that I hear coming out of this group has nothing to do with entitlement of the property owners. It has to do with a system that allows big corporations to come in and have exorbitant rents. The lowest rent across the street is probably $3,500 a month, and it goes up from there. And who's renting it? Amazon, Microsoft, the big companies are affording that for their high-tech employees. It's not the people you say you want to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Benishinsky.
Tracy Benishinsky, Kenmore. Honorable Mayor, Honorable Deputy Mayor, Honorable Council members, thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. I see that there will be a public hearing for a proposed amendment to the exceptional tree ordinance next week. I offer you a preview of my thoughts tonight and will come to say it again. I am opposed to the proposed amendment, which would significantly weaken our exceptional tree ordinance. The fact that an attempt to weaken the exceptional tree ordinance has now come back for the third time in different form makes me suspicious. Why is this happening? The explanation offered that the original exceptional tree ordinance created unintended consequences for housing is not holding up for me. That rationale is broad and ambiguous. And as a counterpoint, industry and developers have been creating very intended consequences for trees for more than a century. If we are going for balance, we are nowhere near it, and we need a strong exceptional tree ordinance to help us get there. The idea that we cannot have housing and trees, that one must be sacrificed for the other, is the product of an extractive system that pits needs against one another and values profit over people and planet. It is simply not true that we cannot work toward more harmonious solutions. The indigenous people of this land did it successfully for thousands of years. I will attempt to make more cogent arguments next week. For now, I would like to leave you with the words of Greta Thunberg. In the coming decades, we will undoubtedly be needing every possible carbon sink to sequester and store CO2, and yet a forest area the size of a football field is being cut down every second, according to Global Forest Watch. Planting trees in suitable soils and places is great, however, very far from as easy as we seem to think. But even more efficient is to leave natural habitats intact in the first place and to rewild and restore nature. But as long as a dead tree is more valuable to us than a living tree, as long as the destruction of nature is worth more than nature itself, and as long as health, biodiversity, well-being, empathy, equality, sustainability, and long-term holistic thinking is not considered a priority, but rather seen as extreme views, we won't be able to solve the climate and ecological emergency. I can imagine that some will be tempted to argue with me that what Greta is talking about is different from the decisions we are facing locally, but I don't think so. I look forward to talking to you more about this next week and protecting trees with you. Thank you so much for listening and for your service to our community. I know it's not easy, and I appreciate you all very much.
Thank you. Jim Myers, Elizabeth Mooney, and Nancy Hansen.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Jim Myers. I've been a resident of Kenmore for 29 years, which is, I guess, longer than Kenmore's been a city, but that's fine. I'm here to address two issues that are sort of recurring issues. One is the tree ordinance, following on what on the fine words that Tracy just gave us, and the other is Lake Point. I think that originally the city of Kenmore began with a good protection ordinance, and efforts to diminish that ordinance, I don't believe are in the public's interest. That the citizens of Kenmore support retaining trees, and I believe that, as we all know, trees provide a lot of the environmental qualities that we've come to expect from this city, and it makes good science sense. We know that they're important for carbon sequestration, shade giving, and other ecologically important goods and services. I think it's important for us to remember that 100 years ago, thanks to the Puget Sound Mill Company, they clear cut this entire city. It was a moonscape. You can look at the pictures. From an ecological standpoint, it's still recovering. And so now is really not the time to go back. I think also from a political standpoint, pressure brought upon cities like Kenmore to pull back some of their ordinances that have that might limit development. I think if we give in on those, it won't stop there. I think other cities will look and see what we've done. And I certainly believe that the city has the authority and the scientific backing to support this effort. I think we really have to hold the line and preserve this city for our children and our children's children, and not necessarily the need to make a fast buck. As I said before, how long does it take to replace a 100-year-old tree? We don't have another 100 years to fix things. So I guess running out of time, quick. Second, Lake Point. I think Lake Point's a wonderful idea. I'm not sure that the city currently has the financial or logistic capacity to take on that task. I think the city should work with other municipalities and reach out to Department of Ecology for help in looking at contaminants.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Ms. Mooney?
Hi, council and staff and community. Elizabeth Mooney, City of Kenmore. I want to start by supporting what Tracy Bonazinski and Jim Myers just said to you, and really encourage you to stay strong on the existing tree ordinance. I want you all to look at me and understand that I really appreciate Nina Rasmussen meeting with us last week. Thanks to her giving us more information about CAP, our climate action project that we are strong in. We need to support that. PERC is going to go over to Lake Forest Park on October 26th for the climate event, 10 to 12 at Lake Forest Park, third place books. But the point is, you have trees here, and now PERC had their meeting last Wednesday. We're gonna have another one November 20th, so 5 to 6:30. You've got more notice. Sorry before for not having notice, but now there's time. We're coming together. We're understanding what you have all been working on. And I really apologize because it's been hard to keep up with all that you're doing. However, now we are getting together. Thank you for Councilmember Joe Marshall meeting at a site visit to discuss 61st. I understand so much more. Thank you for doing that with our community member, Jim Howard, and some PERC members, a teenager. It was really positive. So we're moving on. And by moving on from that site visit, I feel really good getting more informed, having time to learn more about this tree ordinance. And the people who live here are coming to you saying, okay, now we get it. I'm contacting more people. I understand that there's pressure for a change to the existing tree ordinance, exceptional tree ordinance, and I am here to say and spread the word as best I can in our community that in my opinion, you should not change it at all. We need the trees, and also, good grief, why are we not Tree USA City? We've been asking for that since PERC started. We should be Tree USA, not let Lake Forest Park grow all the trees. We need to be proud, take care of our streams, our wetlands. And this is from the city of Carlsbad in California. People went around and they documented where their special trees were. I propose that we start that as a project, a community project. And everybody, my husband and I, we have an exceptional non-native tree. Jim Howard has suggested that if anything were to be changed, you change that to be more protective of the non-native trees too, because they're going to provide shade. So anyway, let's just become Tree USA. The people who want it are your constituents. The developers who want to make more money to clear cut, in my opinion, you should not change the tree ordinance to make it more attractive for developers to clear cut in Kenmore. It's a no-brainer.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson.
Nancy Hanson from Kenmore.
Ms. Hanson, would you lower the microphone just a bit
Yeah,
for yourself?
Okay, to my height.
There we are.
Let's see, I was over in Edmonds today, and I wanted to say that I talked to a lot of people, and they seem so appreciative of their trees. We talked a lot about trees today, and I just thought, gosh, they're getting support from the city, and I don't feel we're getting that here, I guess. And I don't feel the same about Kenmore as far as getting the support we want and need. And we've been asking for a long time. I know everybody else has been here longer than me. So anyway, I'm asking in my ask for two real simple things as far as the tree ordinance goes. And I wanted to explain which ones and why. The Western red cedar and Douglas firs both need regulations that will be more effective in saving them, especially with climate threats. And I chose those two because they're the two dominant species of the Puget Trough. The trough is the land from the sea level up to about 100 feet high in elevation, and that would be about 100 feet is about where St. Edward's Lodge sits. And cedars are an understory tree and always came into existence later than the Doug firs. They require much more specific growing conditions than firs, like they need more water and they do need shade. And groves of cedar used to be limited to only forest wetlands in the Puget Sound Trough, according to the DNR records. Most have been destroyed as of today due to intense building at sea level that we know everybody wants to live at sea level. So I believe these need a much lower width than what is now listed. I would like to see the lower part of the regulation, whatever. The first figure left was 35 for the cedars, I think, and that should be left as is for the length of time it takes them to grow and the way we know about how long they've lived according to how big they are. But the Douglas fir is the other one that needs to be protected, but not for the same reasons. It's because it's difficult to tell ages of firs. Some can get to 50 inches wide at 80 years. Some are only, they found some at 24 inches that are known to be 400 years old. So they're like, they adapt easier. They can adjust. They have different qualities that allow them to adjust easier. So those two are the ones that I would put my finger on as far as not changing anything. I don't know what pressure you're under to make the limits lower, but I don't see why we have to change anything actually. But I was thinking for Doug firs too, you might use a range of 24 to 35 feet. And then at the time that that specific tree that you're
Thank you,
talking
Ms.
about,
Hanson.
well, anyway, I'll send this over to.
Mayor Herbig, that concludes our speakers list.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming and giving your views. We will keep all those in mind as we move forward with that issue in future meetings. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Councilor Lutzis.
Mr. Mayor, did I miss my chance to pull an item off consent? Or no?
Nope.
Okay.
You could amend, you could make a, you could say that you'd like to pull an item. And we're gonna pull it.
I move to pull item C of the consent agenda off of the consent agenda, move it to the business agenda.
Okay, that doesn't require a second or a vote. Any member can pull something out the consent agenda. So the motion in front of us is now the consent agenda, which has items A and B. Any further discussion? None? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items A and B from the consent agenda are approved. That brings us to item C, the proposed City of Kenmore 2025 state legislative policy statements. Councilor Lutzis, did you want to speak to why you pulled it?
Yes, sure. I wanted to first say thank you to staff for doing a lot of work on it and cleaning it up. It was coherent with the more coherent to me with the policy buckets and everything there. So I just wanted to say thank you. But I did notice a couple of other areas that I felt could be flushed out a little bit more. I agree with almost everything on the policy statement, so I want to make that very clear, but I just feel like there could be some more in some certain areas, some things that I'm very passionate about. I know in particular transportation and also economic development on there. But I also know at this time too, I respect our decision to move forward and you know, if I'm not looking to put more work on staff at this point, but at least to voice these things and say that with a little more time and a little more work and maybe next legislative cycle, we can flush out these and put some more things. I think I felt some of the policies were just a little lacking, but that's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments on that? Chair, I hear a motion to approve the proposed City of Kenmore 2025 state legislative policy statements. Motion, I'll second. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve the proposed Kenmore 2025 state legislative policy statements, Councilmember Lutzis.
No.
Councilmember Shribnick.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen.
Yes.
Councilmember Culver.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes. The policy statements are approved 6-1. And maybe next year we put together a little bit of a committee or something with our lobbyists and work through some of that beforehand. All right, that brings us to the meat of our agenda. Budget presentations. I am not reading all these off. So many different funds. But it'll be presented by department heads and staff. That I can say. So department heads and staff.
Good evening, Council. Welcome to part 2 of budget presentations. We have a lot for you tonight, so we will try to get through it quickly, but slowly enough to digest it and ask questions. I will identify the page numbers, and just so you know, for those of you looking in your book, most of the page numbers are off by 3. So just add 3 if you're curious, but I will read them off because not all of them are off by 3, but most of them are. And we are starting with community development tonight, and go through all the budgets that Debbie is overseeing, and then we'll move to John and then Jennifer. So that will be the order of going through these slides. So first off, community development.
Evening, Council.
And this is page 105.
Thank you, Melinda. Debbie Bent, Community Development Director. I'm here tonight to give you an overview of what community development does, the budget requests and projects that are upcoming. So you see the description in front of you. So we are responsible for long-range planning, and largely that relates to the comp plan, which is the guiding policy document for the community vision. We also are responsible for strategy plans like the affordable housing plan, the park recreation open space plan. We also do development regulations that implement those policies and strategies, responsible for managing the park capital improvement program related to planning, acquisition, and development. And then we have a couple of nice little added ones there, which is emergency management and special projects, which is a multitude of things, but right now the focus is Lake Point. And community engagement is overarching on all those tasks that we do. So for the proposed budget, you see the numbers up there on the bottom of the slide, and those represent a 20% decrease from the 2023-2024 budget expenditures. We're looking at a total for the biennium of 1.6, a little over that, and that represents 4.3% of the general fund. So what are some of the highlights and changes? We would be looking at a new senior project manager. This would be a new position that would take on tasks related to the Lake Point acquisition and development. This position would be in the community development department, and I would be their supervisor. The project manager position has been vacant since May of this year, and we do not intend to fill that position, as in the next biennium there are limited park capital improvement projects. However, there is a lot going on in planning, which you'll see on the next slide. And for that reason, I'm looking for a limited term senior planner position to assist with the annual docket work program that the council approves early in the year. And that also would be funded in the Lake Point Fund. This backfill position also will allow me to spend more time on Lake Point, because typically I not only oversee the department, I also manage projects as well, and I just don't have the capacity to do all of it. So next slide, lot to read there, and I've probably missed some projects, but it's full. You can see it's full, and there are some things in there which we have to do. Updating the park recreation open space plan. The deadline for that is March 2026, and that is to remain eligible to receive to apply for RCO grant funds. To go along with that, we need to update the pros element of the comprehensive plan, the park capital facilities element, and update the park impact fee study. So you can see we're in more of a planning phase as it relates to parks. Middle housing, you will be looking at the housing element of the comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, we had hoped to bring forward implementing regulations, but we need more time. And the state gives us till June of 2025. And we'll also similarly be bringing forward those ADU regulations next year. So those are I just highlighted those because those are just a few things that we actually have to do with state mandated deadlines. But you can see there is a whole host of other things that we need to do as well, and some things which we're not sure of. For example, addressing the manufactured housing regulations, or if Bastille wants to update or amend the master plan. So we have some unknown things there, but you can see there's a bunch of things that we have to do. And if the legislature passes new legislation, it's only going to add to the list. So here you see the staffing. So myself, the principal planner, Todd Hall, and then those two new positions I previously mentioned. And then we have a 0.6 FTE admin specialist to support the department and also provide clerk duties for the Planning Commission. Any questions on community development before I move into the next fund?
Councilor Sassen.
Point of ignorance, what is an RCO grant? What does RCO stand for?
It's the State Recreation and Conservation Office. Sorry about that for the acronym.
Okay.
This next series, park impact is park capital is 160.
So the Park Capital Fund, as the name suggests, accounts for revenues and expenditures for park acquisition and improvements. And those revenues come from a variety of sources. And the expenditures are based on the adopted Park Capital Improvement Program and adopted Park Recreation Open Space Plan. So the budget there, the total expenditures are a little over $500,000, which is split between park projects and then a transfer to the general fund for park maintenance. Looking at revenues there, you can see that the revenues come from the King County Park Levy proceeds, a transfer from the Swamp Creek Basin Fund, and a transfer from Park Impact Fee Fund. The ending fund balance will be just a little shy of $950,000. So what are the highlights and changes? And those are that a lot of park development resources have been shifted to Lake Point to support the park acquisition portion of that Lake Point property. And so there are minimal park capital projects in the next biennium. I say minimal, and so we'll see what those are. We still have some, and they fall into, I've put them into 3 categories here. So we have the first category, which is mitigation monitoring projects, and that is for ongoing monitoring, maintenance of mitigation that was required for those park improvement projects. And so there is a period of between 5 and 10 years that we have to ensure that the mitigation that was planted survives, etc., in order to meet permit requirements. So that is for 3 projects: Tlockwood East Park, Log Boom Park, and a small amount for the Rhododendron Boathouse. We're getting close to the end of that project, but those other 2 projects have ongoing mitigation requirements. In terms of planning projects, there is one project which is a preliminary feasibility concept level development for a potential City Hall playground, an accessible and inclusive playground, which would be funded by park impact fees. And then lastly, parks maintenance, as previously noted, some funds will be transferred to the general fund for park maintenance costs. So how does this work for staffing? Well, if we, as I said, we're not going to fill the parks project manager position. So those mitigation monitoring projects, I will take over that responsibility for making sure that overseeing the consultant contracts for those and coordination with the Public Works Department. For that feasibility analysis, the proposal is for the assistant to the city manager to lead that feasibility analysis. But if that project does move forward into the next phase of development, or if there are new park projects added in the outlying years of the capital improvement program, so beyond 2026, or new projects are added, then we would need to assess the need for staff to manage those projects. Any questions on the Park Capital Fund?
Councilor Shevnik.
Yeah, thank you for this. And I will just say, I absolutely know we already vetted our CIP. So I'm just putting a stake in the ground for when we talk about the CIP next. That I really do want us to do something more with Twin Springs. Doesn't have to be a big deal. I know we decided to limit it. But when I visited it on our, we all did tours with Rob. I was reminded of the potential there, and so that's one. I do want us to articulate that the mitigation property at 192nd, just off of 73rd, mitigation for Chilhowitty's development, is open to the public. It does not, and that's just signage. So those are, there was a third thing and it's gone. So I hope that we can do that either in those things in this biennium or very shortly after.
Next section is page 163.
So the Park Impact Fee Fund, as again, the name implies, accounts for fees collected from new residential development. And the expenditures, the revenues that are collected are spent on park improvements that will benefit new development. The impact fees are established by a park impact fee study, and the park impact fee rates can be increased annually based on a 5-year rolling average of the Washington State Department of Transportation Construction Cost Index. Gosh, that's a mouthful. The proposed budget would be looking at $550,000 of expenditures with an ending fund balance of approximately $452,000. So what are some of those highlights and changes? $450,000 would be transferred to the new Lake Point Fund, more to come on that, and $100,000 would be transferred to the Park Capital Fund. So again, the project thing would be the Lake Point to help fund the park site investigation and develop conceptual park design. And for Tlacquidese, $40,000 to help fund those ongoing monitoring maintenance activities. And $60,000, this would be a new project for that City Hall accessible playground to fund the site feasibility and develop preliminary concepts. So for the Park Impact Fee Fund, as I've said, I would take on responsibilities related to those 3 mitigation maintenance projects in coordination with Public Works, and the assistant to the city manager will have the lead on the feasibility analysis for the City Hall. But again, if either that City Hall playground project moves forward or new parks projects are added, we will need to kind of look at what resources are needed to support park project management. Questions on the Park Impact Fee Fund? Okay.
All right, page 144 for the public art.
So the Public Art Fund, this is the fund that takes in revenues from city capital projects. An appropriation of 1% of awarded construction contracts is set aside into the Public Art Fund. Alternatively, those construction projects and for either parks, transportation, or surface water can actually include public art in the project, equivalent to 1%. So on the expenditure side, those expenditures can be used for public art displays, public art acquisition, sponsoring community art projects and performing art. And all this is outlined in the Kenmore Municipal Code. So for the budget, just a little over $62,000 in 2025, and a reduction to 2026 is of just a little shy of 20,000. So total $81,990. So this is a significant 87% increase in fund expenditures over the expenditures that were in the prior biennial budget. But there is, at the end of the this biennium, 25-26, we would be looking at just a little over $20,000 as an ending fund balance. So what are we going to be doing? Well, let's take a look. So there's a proposal for new public art, a mural, and that represents almost 49% of those budget expenditures. Also increased funding for the arts of Kenmore to support the Kenmore Art Gallery and some additional projects and sponsorships. Adding new funding for community art projects, things like Love Notes, for example, and then moving current expenditures for the annual Mayor's Choice art purchase from council expenditures. So those are the highlights and changes. And let's take a look at projects. So for projects, this would be to support 5 shows for the City Hall Art Gallery, working with Arts of Kenmore. Community projects, $6,000. Again, this is for Arts of Kenmore support if new Love Notes, for example, come in, or could be a separate community project for art. And then there would be support for miscellaneous art projects for just $11,610 for Arts of Kenmore support. And this is for things like for supplies for the annual Youth Poet Laureate program, art projects at up to 6 events at city events, and the Arts of Kenmore support to schools. The Mayor's Choice purchase at the annual art show, and then sponsorships that Arts of Kenmore provides to other entities for community art. And again, that the mural to add art elements on the 68th Avenue Northeast in the vicinity of the Sammamish River bridges.
Debbie, we'll go back to that previous slide. My apologies, I should have caught this on the mural. We had discussed the mural going on that retaining wall at the intersection of 181st and 61st. That ring a bell?
So apologies, I got the wrong location there.
No,
So it
that's
isn't.
my fault. I should have been more clear and should have caught that. But yeah, the idea there is to retain and commission a local indigenous artist to do a kind of a, what's the word? A scene there on that wall depicting Native American history. So that's what we've been wanting to do that for a number of years, and just it's always been like squeezed out because of workload demands, but we're gonna see if we can try to do it next year.
Councilor Shubnik?
On that note, I do remember in our last for Love of Kenmore, a similar idea for a mural was a winner, but the mural was the backside of Safeway. And I don't know whether that's, anyway, I mean, that's just, I'm not sure how we got to the 61st. I mean, sure, that's a great location too. But anyway, I mean, we had a process. Thinking that we might want to discuss it with AOK too.
Yeah, Safeway's just been really hard to get an answer from. We tried a number of years ago, and then AOK also tried and just couldn't get through to them or get an answer back.
And also For the Love of Kenmore projects are not necessarily city projects. It's us, helping somebody go along with something just doesn't become, okay.
I wanted to add clarification. Debbie did mention art at the West Sammamish River Bridge. If we have remaining funds in that project, we had proposed to divert some of those funds to add more art to that corridor. We have a couple of paddles that are blank that are meant to hold some sort of art, and we were also looking at possible some plop art along that area. And so if we have available funding, I was asking Debbie to provide some resources to potentially install that if she had the capacity. So I think that's where the confusion came in with the bridge.
I'm sorry, did you say plop art?
Plop art.
Is that a term of, is that a term of art?
That's a term that I had learned when I worked at the city of Shoreline. You just piece of art and you plop it in spot.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Okay, well, I just learned something. Pop art, okay. So how do we kind of staff this? So the administrative specialist in the community development department is the liaison with Arts of Kenmore for Arts of Kenmore sponsored city projects, including the City Hall Art Gallery. And this responsibility was transferred from the city manager's office. So I would then give oversight for that AOC contract, and also I'd have oversight of parks CIP projects and compliance with that 1% for arts. And the city engineer and the environmental service director, they would have similar oversight for transportation and surface water capital improvement projects for compliance with appropriating that 1% to the public art fund, or for including art in projects. Any questions? Now we've confused you on murals and plop art.
The Lake Point is page 173.
All right, what page is that?
173.
Thank you.
And I understood that the city manager may have some introductory remarks about this fund. That's what you told me this morning.
Let's see, now I gotta make something up here. No, I guess just as background, Lake Point has been kind of the elusive big project that the city has paid attention to for a long time. Developers have come and gone over the years. It does have great potential to do a number of things that are on your council priorities. Number one is habitat restoration, environmental stewardship. We're looking at purchasing most of the shoreline with Conservation Futures grant funding that would be restricted for restoring the shoreline to riparian use. And then also economic development. If the rest of the property is developed into a walkable urban village, then that would help with our tax base and provide local shopping and other economic choices that people could have without having to leave the city. And then of course, housing, adding to our housing stock. So we're looking at acquiring the shoreline, about 150-foot wide swath of shoreline, a little over 3,000 lineal feet, plus a 4.5 acre, what I'm calling Central Park. Where in my budget letter, we called it a drop dead gorgeous park. This would all take voter approval. This is something that we don't have the means to do within our existing budget or even councilmanically. So at some point to realize this vision, it would need to go to the voters for approval. We are only proposing to buy a portion of Lake Point, about 15 acres of the 40, or 17 if you count submerged land. But before we make that commitment or before we even take something to the voters, we need a lot of questions answered. We need a lot of due diligence done, including testing of soil, groundwater, nearshore sediment. And we need Department of Ecology concurrence and need to get their technical assistance and as well as their buy-off on what we're trying to do, other agencies, things like that. We need to bring the community along. We need to do some design work and some conceptuals and get community feedback on what they'd really like to see in more detail on Lake Point. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done before we take it to the voters. And so what you have here is a budget to do just that, to tie up the property and also to do the design and the due diligence work and the community engagement. How's that, Debbie? Did I cover it?
And then some, yes, thank you. So the Lake Point Fund, this is a new fund that we're setting up this year, again, to account for those expenditures for the potential acquisition of the property as Rob described, and potentially also to support the search for a developer to develop the remaining portion of Lake Point into that walkable urban village. So the budget, and I just want to kind of point out that this says budget 2024. Some of those revenues and expenditures may not happen in 2024. They may end up being in 2025, because as we're already in the middle of October, we still don't have a letter of intent with the property owner. So that's something that may happen either really towards the end of this year. So a lot of these revenues and expenditures might end up rolling into 2025. Just wanted to point that out. So the Lake Point Fund, the budget for 2025 and 2026 is laid out there in terms of the sources for revenues. You can see that there is $90,000 identified there as unsecured grants. So that is funding that we currently don't have. But the other funds are outlined there from surface water, park impact fees, the grant that the Environmental Services Director applied for earlier this year from the King County Flood District for $150,000 to help with testing in the shoreline area. For expenditures, again, on the previous slide, it was talking about a bond anticipation note that would need to be approved by council to provide earnest money to the property owner, who then needs some money up front to kind of tie up that property. So that's what that 2024 expenditure for the bond anticipation note would be. And ongoing expenditures then in 2025 would be for interest on that bond anticipation note. You can see how those other costs line out there. Legal costs to support whether that's development of the letter of intent, the purchase and sale agreement, to help on the environmental side. For example, working with the Department of Ecology on consent decree or approvals from ecology. Consultant costs to support testing, to support development of conceptual plans for shoreline restoration and park development. Consultant help to apply for all those grants. If we are working on a request for qualifications or proposals for a developer, we need some assistant and expertise to support that effort. And also community engagement. We need to bring the community along on all the steps that we would take towards that acquisition. And there's a small amount of project contingency in the expenditure line item. So changes, and this is just to highlight again some of those things that have been ongoing in 2024. We are working towards a letter of intent and a purchase and sale agreement which would outline the terms and conditions for acquiring a portion of the Lake Point property for shoreline restoration and the Drop Dead Gorgeous Park. Also, this assumes that council will authorize those 2024, 2025 expenditures. It's too soon right now to anticipate what the 2026 expenditures would be. And this is also assuming that council would approve the senior project manager position and the limited term senior planner backfill position. So another big slide of what we will try and accomplish. Again, some of the things that we anticipate in 2024 might roll into 2025, but we would hope early in 2025 to have a purchase and sale agreement with the property owner. And then we would be bringing forward consultant contracts, either late 2024 or early 2025, to assist with that due diligence effort. That would be for legal consultants or for consultants to assist with testing and developing those concept plans, community engagement. And I guess the goal would be to complete that due diligence effort and development of conceptual plans, hopefully by May of 2025. So we have a solid knowledge that it's feasible we've completed the testing and we know development of what the city wants to do is feasible. And we have those concept plans developed so that you can then continue that community engagement effort for a potential ballot measure in November of 2025 at the earliest for formation of a metropolitan park district, which would be the mechanism then to support a funding source, a revenue source for the acquisition, development, and ongoing maintenance of the Lake Point Park project and any other park development. It could be broadened to other park maintenance as well. So again, there's a lot of assumptions here, but let's assume that we're all cup half full people here. This happens, and that would then mean in 2020, if the vote is on the ballot and that ballot is passed in 2025, then the Metropolitan Park District would be established in 2026 to then start the execution and set up that funding for site acquisition. We'd also then hopefully be well into having a developer on board and coordinating with that developer to how the city's acquisition then could support and complement development into that walkable urban village. And you can only imagine that the permit process for this would be intense, and every agency will want some kind of permit or approval. It's going to take a lot of work and effort. Understand that there is a lot of opportunity for grants out there. Grants aren't free. You either have a city match, it takes a lot of resources to manage those grants, and community engagement is no small effort either. So again, we're at the start of what will hopefully be a very exciting project, and this will be a legacy project for Kenmore, but it's going to take time and effort and a lot of resources.
Deputy Mayor?
I was okay with
Oh,
waiting till the
sorry.
very end, but if you don't mind, I can do it now. Either it's a final comment, so I can wait.
Okay, I think I have one last slide. So how are we going to staff this? So myself and the city manager are co-project leads. If the senior project manager position, that would be a new position, and then the limited term senior planner backfill position. And that's the funding. So any questions about the Lake Point Fund?
Deputy Mayor?
I have just a few comments, actually. Number one, I just really appreciate the detail and time that you put into this, keeping us and the public informed, making this transparent where we're going and the direction we're setting. I think it's incredibly important, the work that you're doing in that area. I just had just a few words that came to mind. I get excited about Lake Point. I think everyone knows. But Rob, I would suggest adding a green walkable urban village to the language, just when we talk about it, just a thought. And then in the long run, salmon safe would be nice. And I like the idea of an awe-inspiring, gorgeous park, considering we're concerned about chemicals and things, you know. I love Drop Dead. I know what it means, but I'm just having fun, you guys. Okay, that's totally fun. I'm really thankful for your work and what you've put together for us.
Councilmember Sassen and then Councilmember Culver. Yes.
I just want to clarify that the glass is half full of really hard work and good ideas. Is that where we were going with that glass is half full?
I am, because I think you can get overwhelmed with what it will take.
Yeah.
And so I think we're trying to be strategic here on steps to move forward.
Yeah.
In a manner that it is a big budget for that first step, but we want to make absolutely sure that we've done the right amount of work for testing and feasibility and develop concept plans that we have confidence in what it is that we want to move forward with.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying it's a glass half full.
Absolutely. I just, anyway, I appreciate why we as a council made Lake Point called it out as one of our council priorities for 2025. But in addition to that, to my mind, Lake Point ticks most of our top priorities. And so I think we get a lot of bang for our buck with this project. And I know that it will be a lot of work, and I commit to bringing you cookies.
I'll commit to eating them.
Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Several questions. Going back to the 2024 budget slide, I want to better understand, this is laying out like some of the more like acquisition related costs. We understand it's been part of a lot of ongoing discussions that this has also been a hurricane of work. Maybe that is even an understatement. Do we have any sort of estimate on what we have actually put into this so far in 2024 in terms of staff time and events, surveys, et cetera? Do we have any working number on that?
Yes, we do. And I think we gave you an update back in July, if I'm not correct, about the expenditures to date. And I think the expenditures on this side kind of add, the only thing that wasn't on that in the update was the cash up front to the seller. But most of those other costs, I think we kind of outlined what those would be in our last update to council.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure I understand process. Was that approved up front as part of the 2023-2024 budget, or how did that come to be?
This will require a budget amendment that will be brought forward later, and that would be part of creating this fund. So it would either be a budget amendment that would have been brought forward, but now we're bringing it forward as creating this new fund. So it's creating a new fund that will need council action to create the fund and authorize the revenues and expenditures to date for 2024.
Okay, so we would sort of retroactively do a budget amendment for the money that we have spent so far in 2024.
Yes.
Yes, and we can also cover what we've spent so far in the existing budget.
Okay.
Legal and design work, which has been minimal.
Okay, is that typical that we spend money before we plan to spend it?
As I'm keeping council informed along the way, yes.
Right, but council would need to take an affirmative vote on those things, right?
I have the authority to spend budget within the fund level of the budget. And as long as we're within that budget, then I can proceed, and as long as I'm keeping you guys informed.
Okay. I'm also a little unclear on order of operations here. I guess let's start with a few things. Let's say the glass turns out half empty. Drop Dead Gorgeous, I enjoyed that a little too much. If it doesn't work out, do we simply lop off the Lake Point Fund and say, okay, we tried, we are washing our hands, we are not proceeding, and everything else in the budget falls into place? Or do we need to do like contingency planning, or how do we plan for this sort of Schrodinger's cat reality, I guess? That's not too physicsy.
Well, I think, first of all, that these expenditures and revenues are anticipated in where we have the ending fund balance for the 2025 and 26 budget, correct? Yes. So that's, these expenditures are included in the budget. And also on, I just want to just go back to your question about costs. That 450,000 due diligence consultant cost, that has not all been expended right now. That is anticipating that bringing on a consultant for those due diligence costs. So we have not spent that yet. That will require approval of authorization by council of a consultant contract, as will some of these other consultant contracts will require council authorization if they are above the city manager's authority.
Right, okay. And just to make sure I understand order of operations then, is the suggestion that we would approve this budget and then do a letter of intent, or what is the timeline on that?
We are trying to work with the property owner to get a letter of intent approved, hopefully before the end of the year. If we do, then we may have time to bring forward some of these consultant contracts for council authorization prior to the end of the year. So it depends, because we need to have that letter of intent in place before we start spending a lot of money. So there is sort of checks and balances there that council does have to provide approval when the consultant contracts are beyond the city manager's authority. And we haven't gone beyond that to date.
And I'll be bringing forward budget amendment information at the next council meeting. So you'll see any areas where we need to have amendments before the end of the year.
Okay, and just want to make sure I'm understanding. So we would theoretically approve depending on the timing of the letter of intent, we would theoretically approve the budget without the Lake Point pieces. And then if the LOI say comes in after, we would amend it? No, I'm getting,
No.
Okay.
It's in there. So all the Lake Point potential costs for 25 are included in the budget, and the costs anticipated for 24 that you see here will be included in the budget amendment that you'll see next week.
Okay, so then it's just caveated with a big assumption, assuming.
Right. The budget will be in place. The budget authority will be in place should we need it.
Okay. I will stop for now. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, did you have a comment?
Yeah, actually, like to just show a couple slides about it. This is a little impromptu, asking the city clerk to put some pictures up, but you saw this in the budget letter, and this is something that we've been showing the community quite a bit. You can see that shoreline area that we would propose to acquire, plus that potential park area. So that's the area that we'd be looking to acquire. And then we did have some renderings drawn up of what the whole thing could look like. Very high level conceptual, definitely will change and look different from this ultimately. But if you can go to the next slide. So there's a rendering there. That green space in there, the park there is intentionally left undetailed because we still have process to go with the community to find out what we should put there ultimately. So that's left without a bunch of detail. And if you can go to the next couple slides. So that's possibly what an urban village could look like. But again, whatever developer comes and builds this will actually build something different from what you see. This is just one idea. And then the next slide is a top-down version of what it could look like.
Can we go back to the first slide really quickly?
Yeah.
So the question that's just now occurring to me looking at this slide is, how's the public going to access the area that we're acquiring before the rest of the site is developed?
Yeah, so we are working with the property owner to put in an access road and also a parking lot there.
So we'd have an easement through property we don't have? Okay.
Also, if you go to the far right, see that little green little finger?
Yeah.
That would get you up to 68th Avenue from a pedestrian standpoint.
Okay, but would access be part of the letter of intent?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had a question about community involvement. Are we I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming we'd be doing a statistically valid survey at some point to Kenmore residents about, I assume that's part of the community engagement. Is that correct or?
Yeah, we have money in there for survey. Statistically valid. Yeah, I mean, we've already done a statistically valid asking people what they'd like to see at Lake Point. I believe we did that last year. We could do one again to get more up-to-date information.
Or it might come in once we have those plans developed, as we're looking at community engagement for a potential bond measure. And that was something that we did when we did the walkways and waterways bond measure. We did community surveys before we went out to the ballot and asked more specific questions. That's an option too.
Councilor Shevnik?
Yeah, it's hard for me to suppress my excitement about this. It is something that our residents have wanted for more than 30 years, more than the city has been incorporated. So this is really exciting, and thank you, Mayor Herbeck. I was also going to bring up the community engagement. That said, I do want to respect our council members who may want to have more discussion on the, so to speak, on the merits. And I just want to respect that and hope that we have a robust opportunity to talk about it.
Additional comments on Lake Point Fund?
Okay, next up is going to be John Vicente, and he's going to start with the Engineering Cost Center, and that's page 92.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So first I'll be talking about engineering department. We're responsible for the Transportation Capital Improvement Program, traffic engineering, transportation planning. I'm also serving as the ADA coordinator. We do right-of-way management, pavement management, roadway safety. We do a lot of grant writing, and we manage the CAPE program. The budget for the engineering department 2025, 2026 is 1.5 million. That's a 13% decrease from our previous 23-24 budget. That's due to a decrease to 3.5 FTEs, not of, it's a little typo there. The remaining 5.5 FTEs are covered under different funds. So the changes for this budget, the transportation capital project managers, I've got 3 FTEs. They're being moved to be fully funded under the Transportation Capital Fund. The right-of-way inspector we currently have will be moved from the Streets Fund into the Engineering Fund, or the cost center. Then the new civil engineering position that we're proposing and the new right-of-way inspector position, both of those will be 0.25 FTEs to the engineering cost center, and the remainder will be covered under the transportation and CAPE funds. For 2026, 2025, 2026, the projects that we're proposing to undertake, the ADA Transition Plan Phase 2, that involves evaluating and putting together a transition plan for our properties. So City Hall, parks, the hangar and whatnot, looking at what our deficiencies are, and we're putting a proposal together to correct those. We're going to be updating our internal policies and goals within our group. I'll be updating the pedestrian facilities plan, the ADA transition plan for the right-of-way, doing another update to Title 12 KMC, and then an update to Title 10. Annually, we do the transportation improvement plan. We'll be taking care of that. We're going to be doing grant writing as usual. And then we're going to be looking to update and clean up our webpage. We've got a lot of information on there that we need to take a look at and clean up. So that's what we're proposing to do for this next biennium. Our staffing within this cost center, the engineering director, city engineer, my position, We have one administrative specialist, one FTE for that, our right-of-way inspector, and then quarter FTE for both the proposed civil engineer and right-of-way inspector. Oh, any questions?
Questions?
Slides.
No, Councilmember Sassen.
I guess I do have a question. The proposed positions, I'm assuming those people are going to be full-time employed, but they're coming out of different cost centers for the remainder?
They are full-time employees. 0.75 of each one of those will be covered under the Transportation Capital Program and the CAPE program.
Transportation capital is page 152, 152.
So the Transportation Capital Fund, those are capital expenditures for things such as sidewalks, bike lanes, ADA transition plan improvements, traffic signals, our enhanced pedestrian crosswalks, pavement overlay, and other roadway improvements. Currently in the 25-26 budget, we've got about $16 million allocated for such projects. Within the CIP for 25 to 2030, we've got $37.7 million. Funding for the Transportation Capital Fund typically comes from our real estate excise tax, transportation impact fees, the CAPE funds, and grant funds that we may acquire for those projects. Some of the changes. We added the 84th Avenue Northeast Ped Bike Project. That's from 150th to 155th, both sides of the street. We've got a Juanita Drive tree removal replacement project. There are some trees that we've noted as potentially hazardous within a strip of land that we purchased from King County off of Juanita, just north of 153rd, that we're looking to potentially remove and then replace with some different types of trees. Then we've got the 66th 196 Slope Stability Project. This is up 66 and 196. There's a slope that's showing some signs of failure, and so we are looking to do some protection for that roadway. Then we've removed the 170th Interim Cyber Project, the 68th Simons Restriping Project, and the Burt Gilman Trail 175th Wayfinding Project because they will be completed this year. It's our anticipation. Then we did a project name change. We changed the SR 522 West B 57th to 61st to the Burt Gilman Trail SR 522 Accessibility Project, a name better suited to what the project's actually trying to accomplish.
Councilor Marshall?
Which side of the street was the Juanita tree removal project?
That is on the east side of the street, just by Guest House Restaurant, that location. So the projects for 25-26, long list. Melinda covered those at the CIP update in September, so I'm not gonna go through each and every single project. I wanna keep you awake tonight, so there they are. Staffing that's covered under the Transportation Capital Fund. We've got 2 full-time senior civil engineers, 1 capital projects manager, and then I'm proposing approximately 0.25 FTEs allocated to the civil engineer and half of an FTE to the right-of-way inspector, the new inspector. Questions on the Transportation Capital Fund?
Questions?
Okay, next one is CAPE, and it's page 141.
So CAPE Fund, the Kenmore Automated Photo Enforcement Program. That program, it manages contract for services, police review, court review, and revenue processing. That's the management of the program itself. The additional funds for the or additional use within the CAPE Fund would be to implement the local road safety plan projects, traffic data collection and analysis, response to traffic-related service requests, pavement management, which includes our annual or biannual pavement analysis, slurry seal, crack seal program, and our pavement overlay. I should note that the pavement overlay funds from CAPE would be transferred to the Transportation Capital Fund to cover those costs. So it's not different from what's in the Transportation Capital. And then police traffic safety, and then traffic safety training and education. Our proposed budget I show the gross revenues for 2025 to 2030, starting at 2.7 million and ending at 4.6 million. The net revenues after we take out all the necessary fees to the consultant, the courts, are from 2025 to 2030, start at 1.8 million and then 2.6 million for the remainder of the 5 years. Highlights and changes. So as previously discussed with council, we're changing the existing school zones, the Kenmore Elementary Zone on 73rd and the Arrowhead Elementary School Zone on Winona Drive from school hour only enforcement to 24/7 day enforcement. And as a reminder, the school hour enforcement relates to just the 20 mile per hour. The 24/7 day is for the regular speed limit on Juanita, not the school zone speed limit. Then we're going to be adding 24/7 day enforcement for the Inglemore High School zone on Simons, same type of enforcement that we're proposing for the elementary schools. This proposal also assumes that we'll be adding a 4th enforcement location in 2026. We will be proposing a location to council in 2025. This also includes an increase in ticket prices from $100 to $110. That's for the 25-26. There will be another proposal for an increase for the next biennium. The projects in 25-26. So we've got the small traffic safety projects. These are little things that pop up here and there that are typically under $10,000, $20,000 per project, depending. Traffic calming projects as they are discovered. This is part of our traffic calming program. All of our traffic data collection and analysis that we perform. Traffic related service requests, so the staff time to review those and provide any kind of response necessary. Slurry seal projects, pavement rating, analysis, pavement overlay, again, transferred to the capital, transportation capital. CAPE program management, just the day-to-day, month-to-month, annual management of that program itself, which again includes the contractor we have and any issues with or concerns regarding court review, and then also just working with the police on their review if necessary. And then traffic safety, police traffic safety services, which be contributing funds into 2026. So staffing covered under the CAPE fund are our city traffic engineer full-time, the civil engineer proposed at 0.5 FTE, and the new proposed right-of-way inspector at 0.25 FTE. Any questions?
Questions?
Okay, this is page 167 for the bridge fund.
The West Sammamish River Bridge Fund, it is not done yet. So if nobody remembers, this project replaced the southbound bridge. And if you didn't know, it was completed. But we still have wetland mitigation that we're dealing with because we got those pesky little permits that require us to take care of a lot of things related to the project. So our proposed budget for 25-26 is $534,000, and then total for 25 to 30 is $718,000. The highlights changes. So we have some unresolved costs with Puget Sound Energy. We undergrounded the existing utilities out there, and as part of that undergrounding, the city is to contribute a certain cost to Puget Sound Energy for that undergrounding cost. We have not been able to get a reconciliation from them on that cost. I've tried several times to get that from them, and I've gotten nothing. And so I'm keeping the funding in there in hopes that they get back to me so that we can pay them the money. And then also there is wetland mitigation required through 2028. Of course, this is our permit requirement. This covers activities within Rhododendron Park and the strip of land adjacent to the boat launch right next to the golf course, or Inglewood. Yeah. oh, sorry. Oh, isn't there another one after that? Yeah, staffing. So there's limited staffing as needed for this. We've got our capital projects manager who managed the project construction will be overseeing the activities for the wetland mitigation with assistance from Jennifer, who has a contractor on board to help with any kind of physical work that needs to occur within the mitigation areas. Any questions?
Councilor Lutzis?
Yes, so I saw you called out 25, 26, and then up till 30, is that right? And is that when we're done with the Sammamish River Bridge Fund?
So the West Sammamish River Bridge Fund should be done by then, and then the rest of the maintenance would fall under park maintenance or wherever Jennifer puts that funding.
Okay, I was just curious. I saw in the binder itself, the 5-year mitigation monitoring. And so I wasn't sure if 2027 was the cutoff year, 2030 is where we move that.
Yeah, 2028 is the cutoff for
2028.
That's when the permit requirement expires. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, next up is Jennifer, and we are on page 117.
All right, we're on the home stretch here. All right, so this is the Events, Volunteers and Recreation Cost Center, which is part of the general fund. This is funding for the city special events, our coordination with the North Shore Farmers Market for the Kenmore Farmers Market. Volunteer programs, recreation programs, park and facility rentals. Any support we're providing is for community events, other love, kind of like love notes in a way, and love notes. This budget includes for the biennium $1.1 million. And let's talk about the highlights and changes. The big thing is that this used to be housed in the city manager's office fund or cost center. And so we've separated it out to have its own cost center within the general fund. We are including all personnel, supplies, and material costs in the fund or in the cost center, sorry. And 20,000 will be going to the Kenmore Farmers Market annually. The lineup for city events for the next biennium are going to look really similar to what we had planned out for this last year. So we're not proposing any new additional events. We're going to have the exact same lineup as we've had for this 2024. The volunteer programs, Adopt a Park, Adopt a Street, Jack Crawford Day, the ATI is the adult transition program working with the Inglemoor High School, Community Court, and others. Recreation programs and partnerships right now, we will maintain the partnerships we are currently in with Kenmore Waterfront Activities Club, the Kenmore Community Rowing Club, rowing with the North Shore School District, the Kenmore Senior Center, the What's Up concession at Laguna Park. We've got Skyhawk sports camps going on at Rhododendron and Skate Like a Girl over at the skate park here at City Hall. We are also put money in the budget for YMCA swim lessons. So that is going to look similar to the program we had a couple years ago where we subsidized swim lessons for low income. The other new thing coming along here is the park picnic shelter rentals and facility rentals. They're going to be kind of managed out of this out of this cost center along with facilities. So they'll be partnering, but the bulk of the management of the actual programs will be done by recreation. As far as staffing concerns, it's fairly straightforward for this one. For the next other cost centers that I'm going to go over, I think my staff is divided up probably between more budgets than any others. But this includes part of my time, part of our admin specialist, and then the full-time events volunteer supervisor and the recreation program supervisor. And that also covers one intern for the summer. Any questions?
Councilmember Sassen.
Thank you. Can you clarify for me how the money for the YMCA swim classes is, how is that allocated? Does that just go to the Y, or do people apply? How do we know it's going to our Kenmore low-income residents?
Yes.
And how do they know it's available, I guess is the.
It was kind of confusing the way that we did this as a pilot program a couple years ago. And what I would like to do is work a little closer with the YMCA to kind of figure out how we can do that. But one of the ideas that I have is we've got a new software program that's going to be used for the picnic shelter rentals. And it's kind of a recreation software. So it's got a lot of capabilities other than like reservations for picnic shelters. So I think that we can come up with a way to do the registration through us, through that portal, and then work with YMCA so that we have a better control over how those are getting doled out. So we would, if it would go through us, we'd give them like probably a voucher that then they could take to the YMCA. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. I'm just also curious how we're going to market it. And I want to make sure that we're doing it in a variety of ways and in a variety of languages.
Yeah, and excuse me, I don't really know. I came in a little bit late as far as like when we did the last program with pilot, I took it over after it was kind of already finished.
Yeah.
So I don't know if.
I think mostly I'm just
Debbie-
coming with curiosity, and I'm sure that it sounds not yet fully baked, so we'll.
Debbie,
figure it
can
out.
you share on how you guys advertise that?
I think we did it through the traditional channels, but what I also remember doing was taking flyers in English and Spanish to all the mobile home park residents and handing them out, because we know that in some of those parks there are a lot of kids, and we felt we had to go directly to the source to try and get interest. We also worked with the local schools as well to get the word out. And so I think when Mary's Place was there, we kind of did some coordination with Mary's Place. So again, we're trying to figure out where we think some of the population might be, so to kind of maybe be more targeted in the approach, as well as with the school district and our normal channels for getting the word out.
Any other questions?
Rob, you had a comment?
Just want to add something. You notice the farmer's market at $20,000. It's a beautiful thing when a plan comes together. So we've been spending $100,000 on a year on the farmer's market for the first 3 years. That was according to plan. We weren't seeing anybody stepping up and creating a farmer's market for us. So we decided to take matters into our own hands and create a farmer's market. The idea was that we would create a successful farmer's market that then we could hand over to a nonprofit farmer's market. And that plan is working. So that's why our contribution is going to be going from over 100,000 a year down to 20. It's because we have the Woodinville Farmers Market that's going to be taking it over and running it under their operations. And our contribution will now be more in line with what other cities contribute to their farmers markets.
I might add that I'll touch on that a little bit in the street fund, because we are going to continue to provide the street closure and detour, all of that set up. And then the other thing is we've got everything that we have purchased for the farmer's market, like tents, all of the kind of like materials, supplies for tables, et cetera. We'll have a storage room here at City Hall for them to access all of that stuff for.
Next up, facilities and fleet maintenance on page 121.
Okay, facilities and fleet maintenance. So this is just the day-to-day operation and maintenance of all of the city facilities. That includes City Hall, the hangar building, and currently the Public Works Office. This is oversight and support of the tenants within the city-owned facilities, on-site, internal, external customer service. It also includes kind of the overall management oversight of the city's fleet vehicles and equipment, new vehicle and replacement vehicle procurements, surplusing of vehicles and equipment, and emergency response. The Facilities and Fleet Cost Center is part of the general fund, and the total budget over the biennium is almost $2 million. The highlights and changes, again, this has been pulled out from a parks budget. So we used to have the parks and facility maintenance in one. We are divvying that up. And so now they're in their own cost centers, but they're still both in the general fund. This includes all of the in-house staff cost, the contracted service, materials, and supplies. Some of the projects that we would want to work on in the next biennium are upgrading the access control systems here at City Hall and the hangar, and assess a plan for building maintenance needs for the new Public Works Operations Center. Again, this is funding part of my position, part of our admin specialist position, a full-time facility fleet maintenance supervisor, senior facility maintenance technician, and a part-time maintenance technician. And we've added a facility seasonal intern also. Any questions?
Questions? On page 121, you talk about new department vehicles with upfits. What exactly is an upfit?
So when you order a vehicle, it's kind of like, just like how you would order a vehicle, or you buy a vehicle with the different gadgets, whatever that you want. So we typically add like specific things like, maybe there's a cargo box or something on the back, or a lift gate or something like, so those are upfits that we get done by kind of separately.
All right, I was just, yeah, the word didn't make just need clarification. Thank you. Councilor Lutzis.
I just had a quick clarifying question about the personnel. In this, I see part-time facility maintenance technician at 0.4, which is, I don't know, kind of an uncommon FTE. Usually I see the 0.25 or the 0.5, and I'm just curious how that was determined.
Yeah, and I feel like I have a lot of those. So this one specifically is because this position was created when we opened the hangar to be able to support the 7-day-a-week. So this represents somebody that works just the weekend, or
thank you.
Friday and Saturday, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Okay, park maintenance is next, page 124.
All right, parks maintenance, like very similar to facility and fleet. This is the day-to-day operations and maintenance at our park properties and other city-owned green spaces. This provides the day-to-day supervision and oversight of our in-house maintenance staff, contract management, and coordination with our recreation and community events. Okay, so biennial budget over the biennium is at $2.3 million. Again, we have broken out the facility and fleet from the parks maintenance, so they're separate cost centers, but they're still in the general fund. The budget includes cost of all the in-house personnel, contracted staff, materials, and supplies. We did do some staffing and program reorganization during this last biennium, and we went from a parks lead to we created a parks and streetscape supervisor position. And we did that to kind of offload kind of the imbalance of work there was with the street and surface water supervisor. So when we get to the staffing, again, it's a little bit confusing because there's so many staff that are divvied up in different cost centers. But the purpose of the park and streetscape supervisor was to take over the manicured landscape in the right of way. So we kind of separated out between right of way landscape that's manicured and has irrigation versus like just vegetation. And that's typically going to be like, you know, blackberry and an invasive in the right of way. Just reiterating, the maintenance staff is funded by multiple funds in the general fund, street fund, and the surface water fund. Allocation within the parks maintenance fund accounts for the maintenance work only performed in parks and green space. Staffing and work associated with right-of-ways those are all part of the street fund. So again, that's why things are divvied up. And there's some interesting numbers as far as how they're divvied up. So it probably is a little bit confusing. Okay. Let's see, projects coming up the next biennium. We'll be managing park maintenance contracts, including the mitigation, maintenance required mitigation and maintenance that both Debbie and John spoke about. We just recently came to you for a contract for that maintenance. So we'll be managing the maintenance contract for those. We're coordinating with community development for new and ongoing park capital improvement projects, respond to service requests, coordinate and with and provide support to recreation programs, including the new picnic shelter rental program and athletic field rentals. Coordinate with and provide support to the city run events. Develop scopes of work for our volunteer work parties and coordinate and oversee work completed by volunteers. We provide 7-day-a-week service and also 24/7 emergency response. Staffing includes part of my salary, part of our admin specialist salary, and then a maintenance supervisor, senior maintenance worker, and maintenance worker. And here's those interesting divisions of full-time employees. We also have 2 seasonal maintenance workers for the parks. Any questions?
Councilor Shubnik?
Yeah, this is great. Very clear, even though, yeah, you're right. The FTE percentages are a little confusing. Is there any room in this budget for 2 things? One is a little bit more maintenance of the median in 522. That feels to me, particularly during the growing season, thousands of people travel there, and it is our gateway to the city. And it kind of pains me when I see, during the growing season, how, things grow, right?
Yes.
And they need to be dealt with. So increasing the frequency of that one area. So that's one. And the other is, I thoroughly enjoy the Jack Crawford Day every year. And I was shocked at how much debris was on the beach. You guys were rocking it during the summer, and it was great. And I know you have special, I think, a contract maybe to an outside.
Well, that's in-house.
Oh, that is in-house. Okay. Well, whatever was happening was great, but how quickly it really degrades. So again, is there any way to increase the frequency a bit? Obviously, it doesn't, we don't need the same level of maintenance as in the summer, but to let it go to that extent that it was, what we just saw. I don't know if there's any way to increase the frequency on those 2 things.
Okay. Let's start with the last one. Clarifying question for you. Are you talking about the lagoon at Flacodies, or are we talking
I'm
just the
sorry. Log
beach?
boom.
Okay.
Log boom. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess this is actually will hopefully answer both questions, because This transition from capital projects this last summer was really rough for us. So we had the Juanita, we had 68th, we had Tlaquettes, and we had Log Boom. So we had all these new assets come online, all like relatively close together. And we were not prepared. And it was just this time resource kind of issue. We finally have a contract for all of those things. So we've got contracts for Juanita now, we've contract for 68th, and all of the mitigation and parks maintenance over at Tlaquettes, and the maintenance for the mitigation over at Log Boom Park. So the good news is that we don't really have to put so much effort into trying to like maintain all of those new things that now we have contract for that work. So we will be able to put more effort into the other things so that we can do them more frequently. And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's very painful to see it in the condition it is, and it has been. So I hope to have that remedied very soon.
Councilmember Culver.
I just want to check with my colleagues. Could we go for a brief break? We've been at it since 6.
Yeah, I think we're almost, if we're done with this section, we could take a quick break. Are we finished up here?
We have one more set,
Yeah.
street fund,
Just
to
street
go
fund.
through. So we have 4 more slides.
And then staff report and council member reports. So yeah, I mean, I would lean towards just finishing up. Wrong feelings either way? Close. Let's get finished and get home.
Okay, street fund. The street fund covers the day-to-day operations and maintenance of
What's the page number for that?
136.
136. Thank you.
of our infrastructure within city-owned streets and right-of-ways. This includes roads, street signs, traffic signals, electronic flashers and signs, channelization, roadway markings, barriers, fencing, and vegetation management. Manicured and irrigated landscapes, the day-to-day supervision, oversight of in-house maintenance workers and contract management, and again, coordination and support of city-run events. The total for the biennium is just over 3 million. And highlights for the street fund include the right-of-way inspector that John talked about in the engineering. So our right-of-way inspector used to be in the street fund, and now it's going to be housed in the engineering cost center. The budget includes in-house personnel, contracted services, materials, and supplies. Traffic control provided for the Kenmore Farmers Market, which I mentioned earlier. We promoted existing maintenance worker to a senior maintenance worker to provide oversight and guidance to other maintenance workers and seasonal workers during the summer months between the seasonal maintenance workers for the street fund, seasonal maintenance workers for the surface water. It's a lot during the summer. And again, the same message as the others, the maintenance staff is funded by multiple funds, including general fund, street fund, and surface water fund. Allocation within the street fund accounts for maintenance work performed in streets only, and staffing and work associated with surface water maintenance are allocated in the surface water fund. Do we do projects coming up the next biennium, just ongoing coordination with engineering for the transportation and capital improvement projects, respond to service requests, coordinate with and provide support to the city-run events, develop volunteer scopes of work and coordinate and oversee work completed by volunteers, provide 7-day-a-week service and 24/7 emergency response. Street fund includes funding for my position, the admin specialist, a maintenance supervisor, senior maintenance worker, maintenance workers, and seasonal workers. And that's the last of my slides. Any questions?
Councilmember Sassen.
I just want to ask if the bike lane candlesticks are, in your purview. And I have had already this is mostly for public information. I've had some back and forth with the city as a citizen about the candlesticks that were vandalized on Juanita Way and Simons Road. They, to my eye, were very intentionally destroyed, which is a waste and a disappointment. But, it is my understanding that we're awaiting a different quality of product to replace them. Is that true?
Yes, so that area on 170th and Juanita, that is still technically in the capital project phase, so it's in John's realm right now. It will be coming to me to maintain those. Tobin is currently coming up with assessing some different products that will hopefully stand up a little bit better to abuse and also make it easier to switch them out and maintain them. So essentially the base will be installed on the surface mount on the street, but the actual candlestick itself will be removable. So as they're damaged, you can take them out and you could put a new one in. So hopefully we'll be able to do that very soon. The other positive thing about changing those out to a different type will be, hopefully we'll be able to remove those to street sweep without having to, do it by hand. So crossing my fingers that works, but yeah.
Well, in my experience, the vandalism of those proves the need for them, which it proves that people are not driving around them. And so bicycles will be safer with the new product. I also just want to commend the painting that has gone up Simons Road. I just want to thank you for that. That's my neighborhood, and I think it's very effective. And I do think it's contributing to traffic slowing, and sorry to go out of turn, but.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Yes, I just happened to notice as I was flipping through in the binder, and I don't know if do you have the binder in front of you? I just had a clarifying question. Oh,
I can grab it.
no, well, I can always follow up and ask later. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. My apologies.
I did get up.
Yeah, I just happened to notice it now and something that stuck out to me it's page 140.
Okay.
Under the revenues, I noticed that transfer from the general fund switches to 0 in 2025 and 2026. And I was curious why that was. And I wasn't sure if you had an answer. That's okay. If not, I'm happy to follow up after. I apologize.
Yeah, so we increased our vehicle fee tab.
I see.
We
Okay.
doubled it, and so then we're able to stop taking the money from the street fund, and it's being funded through that increase in those revenues.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that, which then gave us the money to fund Climate Action Plan, Program Manager, and Human Services Manager out of the general fund.
Any further questions?
I just wanted to quickly say next steps. We have one more presentation on the 21st on the 28th, and you can see them listed there. And then public hearings on the budget on November 12th and 25th with possible adoption on the 25th.
All right. Thank you very much. Staff reports.
Just one thing, I'm excited about the EV charging community workshop tomorrow here at City Hall at 6:30 p.m. That's all.
Council member reports and comments. Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Two things. The first, the Shoreline Fire Department is having a public meeting next Monday, October 28th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. They're in the process of pursuing a regional fire authority, regionalization of resources and teams and efforts and all those good things, and they are doing a public meeting. So it will be before ours. I will be in attendance and happy to report back, but would encourage everyone to come and learn more about that, certainly us and the public as well. And thing number two, we got a shout out, kind of, in Shoreline Area News. Lake Forest Park Council member Tracy Furutani mentioned Kenmore, and this is in my bummer graphs / data points effort, I guess, talking about housing needs and how we're going and progressing toward our goals. And he mentions permanent supportive housing. Shoreline has 89 such units, Lake Forest Park has 9, and Kenmore has none. We can all do better. Let us commit to that work. That is all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, I'm sorry that Shoreline council member made such a remark and had such an opinion. I definitely disagree with that. I wanted to thank the city manager for that great update on the farmers market. We had originally been spending that amount of money, 80 grand, I think it was, on the market, and I'm very pleased to see that we've gotten it down to the 20 grand. That's great. Thanks.
Councilor Sassen.
I'll pass this evening. Thank you.
Councilor Shribnick.
I just, based on our conversation last week, just wanted to let you know NPRSA did vote to move forward with due diligence on the Woodinville site, potential site for the regional community center and pool. But there's a long way to go before that becomes reality. So we're now moving into a due diligence phase.
Councilor Lutzis.
Yes, really quickly, just wanted to thank staff for all their hard work. Last week, our community development director was not present with us, and I wanted to congratulate her on the reception of a recent award. So congratulations. I also wanted to thank our wonderful city manager, Mr. Rob Carlindsey, for all the hard work that he does. Just let him know that we appreciate you. I know sometimes there's a lot of energy coming from the community in different ways, but just to let you all know that we appreciate you, and we're very grateful to have you. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Councilmember Lutzis, you always make such nice comments. It's very hard to follow you. I have a comment for council. I am very thankful for our planning commission slate that we selected this evening. I think they're very qualified. One thing that stood out to me though is even with our equity framework, we have a supermajority of white males on the council again. And I think it's really important for us to give attention to that. I think there is a room for improvement in our selection process. I regret not choosing to make statements before we voted about a candidate or two that I think I'm happy with everyone that came through, by the way. And I think I voted for all of them, so I'm very happy with them. But what I'm trying to say is something's happening where I think we all have made statements about wanting a diverse planning commission, and it seems to be kind of in a stuck space. Except each person on our planning commission definitely upholds our EDI values, and I am very thankful that they are on our commission. So please, I just wanted to call attention to something we talk about, something we have a toolkit in place for, and we've had 2 selection processes that came out with a very similar outcome. So that's my statement. I'm thankful to be here. Everyone take care of yourselves. Big week ahead. Thank you.
I agree with the deputy mayor's comments. I think we need to do a better job probably recruiting candidates and getting candidates. And I will say last Thursday, I took part in a mayor's forum for Imagine Housing with Mayor Thompson of Bothell, Mayor Pauley of Issaquah, Mayor Burney of Redmond, Mayor Curtis of Kirkland. I think that was everybody. Yeah. Talking about our comp plans, our thoughts about housing, answering questions, things like that. was a good time. Rob was there, Tammy was there, a lot of interesting people in the audience that all ran out before I could go down and say hi to them afterwards. So anyway, good event. Just want to let you know all that it had happened. All right, with nothing more to come before us, we are adjourned.